Sanaa Washington's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst through the emerald green silk of her gown. The charity gala swirled around her in a blur of champagne glasses, string quartet music, and the low hum of polite conversation among Seattle's wealthiest elite. Crystal chandeliers cast bright light across the white marble floors of the Grand Cascade Hotel ballroom, and everywhere she looked, people in expensive clothes laughed and mingled without a care in the world. But Sanaa couldn't breathe. Trevor Mitchell had found her. Again. She'd seen him the moment she walked in, his gray suit stark against the festive atmosphere, his cold blue eyes locking onto her like a predator spotting wounded prey. Her ex-husband. The man she'd finally escaped 6 months ago after 3 years of walking on eggshells, of being told she was worthless, of having her every move controlled and criticized. The man who'd made her feel small and broken. She'd only come tonight because her supervisor at the Rainier Community Center had insisted. The center was receiving a grant from Hayes Global Enterprises, and all the staff were invited to attend the presentation. Sanaa had worn the one nice dress she owned, the emerald green gown her late grandmother had given her, and promised herself she'd stay for exactly 1 hour before slipping out quietly. But Trevor had other plans. He'd cornered her twice already. Once near the silent auction tables, where he'd whispered that she looked beautiful and asked why she wouldn't return his calls. The second time by the hors d'oeuvres, where his tone had turned harsh, demanding to know where she was living now, telling her she was being childish and that they needed to talk. Each time, Sanaa had managed to slip away into the crowd, her pulse racing, her hands trembling. But now, as she stood near the champagne fountain trying to steady her breathing, she saw him approaching again. His jaw was clenched, his stride purposeful. Other guests parted around him without noticing the tension radiating from his body. Sanaa's eyes darted around desperately. The exit was too far. Her co-workers had scattered throughout the room. She was alone, exposed, and Trevor was closing in fast. That's when she saw him. A tall man stood about 10 feet away, his back partially to her as he spoke with an older couple. He wore a perfectly tailored navy blue suit that fit his broad shoulders like it had been made specifically for him. His skin was a rich, deep brown, and even from behind, he carried himself with a quiet confidence that made everyone else in the room seem less substantial. Sanaa didn't think. She just moved. In 3 quick steps, she crossed the distance between them and grabbed his hand. Her fingers wrapped around his warm, strong palm just as Trevor reached her side. The man turned immediately, his dark eyes meeting hers with surprise. He was handsome in a way that would have stolen her breath under different circumstances. Sharp cheekbones, a neat beard, eyes that seemed to see everything. But what struck her most was the way those eyes widened with something that looked almost like recognition. "I'm so sorry," Sanaa whispered, her voice shaking. "Please please." She didn't have to say more. The stranger's expression shifted in an instant. The surprise vanished, replaced by understanding and something fiercer, something protective. His hand tightened around hers, steady and reassuring. "Sanaa." Trevor's voice cut through the moment, sharp and possessive. "We need to talk. Now." The stranger turned to face Trevor fully, and Sanaa felt him position his body slightly in front of hers, a subtle shield. When he spoke, his voice was calm but carried an unmistakable weight of authority. "I don't believe the lady wants to talk to you." Trevor's face flushed red. "This is none of your business. Sanaa is my wife." "Ex-wife," Sanaa corrected quietly, finding her voice. Her hand was still clutched in the stranger's and she couldn't bring herself to let go. It felt like the only thing keeping her grounded. "We're not divorced yet," Trevor snapped. "The papers aren't final. Sanaa, stop making a scene and come outside so we can discuss this privately." The stranger tilted his head slightly, his gaze never leaving Trevor's face. "The lady has made her wishes clear. I suggest you respect them." Something in his tone made Trevor hesitate. Sanaa watched her ex-husband's eyes narrow as he seemed to really look at the man beside her for the first time. She saw the moment Trevor recognized him, saw the way his aggressive posture faltered slightly. "You're Dominic Hayes," Trevor said, and there was uncertainty in his voice now. "I am." The stranger, Dominic Hayes, didn't elaborate. He simply stood there, still holding Sanaa's hand, waiting. Sanaa's mind reeled. Dominic Hayes. The CEO of Hayes Global Enterprises. The man whose company was donating $200,000 to her community center tonight. One of the wealthiest men in Seattle, if not the entire Pacific Northwest. And she just grabbed his hand like a lifeline. Trevor opened his mouth, then closed it. His eyes darted between Sanaa and Dominic, clearly trying to calculate his next move. The flush in his cheeks deepened, but whether from anger or embarrassment, Sanaa couldn't tell. "Sanaa and I have history," Trevor finally said, his voice taking on a false reasonableness. "I'm sure you understand. Married couples have disagreements. We just need to work through some things." "There's nothing to work through," Sanaa said, surprised by the strength in her own voice. Having Dominic beside her, his presence solid and unwavering, made her feel braver than she had in months. "We're over, Trevor. I've asked you repeatedly to stop contacting me." "You don't mean that." "She does." Dominic's words were quiet but final. "And I think it's time you left." For a long moment, Trevor just stared at them. Sanaa could see the rage building behind his eyes, the same rage she'd learned to fear during their marriage. Her body tensed, old instincts screaming at her to placate him, to smooth things over, to make herself smaller so he wouldn't explode. But Dominic must have felt her tension because his thumb brushed gently across her knuckles, a small gesture of reassurance. And he didn't move, didn't back down, just kept his steady gaze on Trevor. Finally, Trevor took a step back. "This isn't over, Sanaa," he said quietly. Then he turned and stalked away, disappearing into the crowd. Sanaa released a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Her legs felt weak, and if Dominic hadn't still been holding her hand, she thought she might have collapsed right there on the white marble floor. "Are you all right?" Dominic's voice was gentle now, concerned. He turned to face her fully, and Sanaa found herself looking up into the kindest eyes she'd ever seen. I'm so sorry," she stammered. "I didn't mean to. I was just desperate and you were there and I—" The words tumbled out in a rush. "Don't apologize." Dominic shook his head slightly. "You have nothing to be sorry for." Sanaa became aware that they were still holding hands and quickly tried to pull away, but Dominic held on for just a moment longer. "He's not a good man," she said quietly, feeling like she owed him some explanation. "I gathered that." Dominic's expression was thoughtful. "How long has he been bothering you?" "Since I left him 6 months ago. The divorce should be final in another 2 weeks, but he—" Sanaa trailed off, not sure how much to share with this stranger who had just saved her. "Will you let me help?" Dominic asked. "At least for tonight. Let me stay close, make sure he doesn't approach you again." Sanaa looked at him carefully, searching his face for ulterior motives, for the kind of manipulation she'd learned to expect from Trevor. But all she saw was genuine concern and something else, something that looked almost like wonder. "Why would you do that?" she asked. "You don't even know me." Something flickered across Dominic's face, an emotion Sanaa couldn't quite name. His lips curved into the smallest smile. "Maybe I'd like to." Before Sanaa could respond, a woman's voice called out. "Don, there you are." They're about to start the presentation. A beautiful young woman with the same dark eyes and warm brown skin as Dominic approached them. She wore a stunning blue gown and had her hair pulled back in an elegant twist. Her gaze moved from Dominic to Sanaa, taking in their joined hands with obvious curiosity. "Amara," Dominic said, "this is Sanaa Washington. She works at Rainier Community Center. Sanaa, this is my sister, Amara Hayes." "It's nice to meet you," Sanaa said, finally releasing Dominic's hand to shake Amara's. Amara's handshake was warm and her smile genuine. "The pleasure is mine. Are you sitting with us for the presentation?" Sanaa glanced at Dominic, uncertain. "I should probably find my co-workers." "Please," Dominic said. "Sit with us. I insist." There was something in his voice that made it hard to refuse. And truthfully, Sanaa didn't want to be alone in the crowd where Trevor might approach her again. So she nodded, and Dominic's resulting smile made something flutter in her chest. As they walked toward the front of the ballroom where rows of chairs had been set up, Dominic kept close to her side. Not touching, but near enough that she could feel the warmth of his presence, near enough that she felt safe. Sanaa couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had just happened, that grabbing this stranger's hand had set something in motion that she didn't fully understand yet. What she didn't know, couldn't know, was that Dominic Hayes had been searching for her for 3 years. That the beautiful woman who had served him coffee and written a message of hope on his cup during the darkest time of his life had been living in his thoughts ever since. That he'd recognized her the instant she'd grabbed his hand, and his heart had nearly stopped at finally finding her again. "Before we continue, can I ask you something? Have you ever had someone show up in your life at exactly the right moment, like they were meant to be there?" Sanaa thought she was just grabbing a stranger's hand to escape danger, but what if fate had been orchestrating this moment all along? If this story is touching your heart, please subscribe and comment below about a time when someone showed up for you when you needed them most. Your story might inspire someone else who's going through a hard time. The presentation was a blur for Sanaa. She sat between Dominic and Amara in the third row, barely processing the speeches about community investment and youth programs, even though her own workplace was being honored. Her mind kept replaying the confrontation with Trevor, the way Dominic had stepped in without hesitation, the strange look in his eyes when he'd held her hand. She was hyper-aware of Dominic beside her. He sat with perfect posture, his attention apparently focused on the stage, but twice she caught him glancing her way as if checking to make sure she was all right. Each time he offered a small, reassuring smile that did inexplicable things to her nervous system. When the director of Rainier Community Center, Patricia Morgan, accepted the oversized check on stage and gave a speech about the difference the funding would make, Sanaa tried to concentrate. Patricia mentioned the staff by name, including Sanaa's, and there was polite applause. "You work with at-risk youth?" Dominic asked quietly, leaning slightly toward her. Sanaa nodded. "I coordinate the after-school program. Tutoring, mentorship, life skills workshops. Most of the kids come from difficult situations. That's important work." There was something in his tone that suggested he meant it, that he wasn't just making polite conversation. Sanaa found herself relaxing slightly. "It is," she agreed. "These kids just need someone to believe in them, to show them they matter. Sometimes that's all it takes to change a life." Dominic's gaze lingered on her face for a moment longer than necessary. "Sometimes one person's kindness can change everything," he said softly. Before Sanaa could ask what he meant, the presentation ended and people began standing, mingling again as waiters circulated with trays of appetizers and champagne flutes. Sanaa's anxiety spiked immediately. Somewhere in this crowd was Trevor, and the thought of running into him again made her stomach knot. Dominic must have noticed her tension because he stood and offered his hand. "Walk with me," he suggested. "There's a balcony overlooking the harbor. It's quieter there." Sanaa hesitated for only a second before taking his hand. His palm was warm and steady, and she felt that same sense of safety she'd experienced earlier. Amara had been pulled aside by someone else, so it was just the two of them as Dominic led her through the crowd. People kept stopping him, wanting to shake his hand or exchange pleasantries, but he moved through the interactions smoothly, never letting go of Sanaa or leaving her side. Several people gave Sanaa curious looks, clearly wondering who she was and what her connection was to Dominic Hayes. She saw one woman in a silver gown whisper to her companion while staring at their joined hands. Under normal circumstances, Sanaa would have felt self-conscious, out of place among all this wealth and glamour. But Dominic's presence somehow made her feel like she belonged exactly where she was. They finally reached a set of glass doors that opened onto a wide balcony. The November air was cool but not uncomfortably cold, and the view of Elliott Bay stretched out before them, the water dark and dotted with lights from boats in the far shore. The sounds of the gala faded to a muffled background hum. Dominic released her hand, and Sanaa immediately missed the contact. She moved to the stone railing, gripping it with both hands and taking a deep breath of the salt-tinged air. "Better?" Dominic asked, coming to stand beside her. "Much better. Thank you." Sanaa glanced at him. "You didn't have to do all this. I've basically hijacked your entire evening." "You haven't hijacked anything. I'm exactly where I want to be." The certainty in his voice made Sanaa's breath catch. She studied his profile as he looked out over the water. There was something so calm about him, so grounded. He seemed like the kind of man who never acted rashly, who thought things through. And yet he'd helped her without a second's hesitation. "Can I ask you something?" Sanaa said. "Anything. Why did you help me?" "Most people would have. I don't know, made an excuse or walked away. But you jumped in like you'd been waiting to do it." Dominic was quiet for a long moment. When he turned to look at her, there was something vulnerable in his expression that surprised her. 3 years ago, he began slowly, my father passed away suddenly. Heart attack. I was 32 years old and I'd just taken over his company. Hayes Global was struggling. We'd made some bad investments and I was drowning in debt and decisions I didn't know how to make. I felt like I was failing at everything, like I was going to lose everything my father had built. Sanaa listened intently, not interrupting. One morning I was walking to a meeting I was dreading and I stopped at this little cafe. Rosie's on Pine Street. I must have looked as terrible as I felt because the woman who served my coffee, she looked at me with such kindness. She didn't know me, didn't know what I was going through, but she saw something. And when she handed me my coffee, she'd written on the cup, "Tomorrow will be better." Sanaa's heart stuttered. Rosie's Cafe. She'd worked there for 8 months, 3 years ago, before Trevor had forced her to quit, saying it was beneath her to serve coffee. She remembered writing encouraging messages on cups sometimes, just little things to brighten people's days. That message, Dominic continued, it sounds small, I know. But it gave me exactly what I needed in that moment. Oh, the reminder that darkness doesn't last forever. I kept that coffee cup. I still have it in my office. And I turned things around. Made hard choices, restructured the company, took risks that paid off. Every time I doubted myself, I'd look at that cup and remember that a stranger had believed tomorrow could be better. He turned to face her fully. So when you grabbed my hand tonight, when you needed help, there wasn't a universe where I would have walked away. We all need someone sometimes. Sanaa felt tears prickling at her eyes. She remembered now. A man in an expensive but rumpled suit, looking absolutely defeated. She'd scribbled that message without thinking much about it, just wanting to offer some small comfort. That was you, she whispered. Dominic's eyes widened slightly. You remember? I remember someone who looked like the weight of the world was on his shoulders. I remember thinking I wished I could help more than just giving him coffee. You help more than you know. Dominic's voice was rough with emotion. I've thought about that moment so many times. I went back to that cafe looking for you, but they said you'd left. I never got your name. And then tonight when you grabbed my hand. He shook his head in wonder. I couldn't believe it was you. After all this time. Sanaa didn't know what to say. The coincidence seemed impossible, too perfect to be real. And yet here they stood, 3 years later, brought back together by her desperate need and his steadfast presence. I wrote dozens of those messages, she said quietly. I didn't think anyone actually read them. I read mine every day for a month. It saved me, Sanaa. The way he said her name with such warmth and reverence made her chest tight. She'd spent 3 years with Trevor, who'd said her name like a complaint, like she was a burden. But Dominic said it like it was precious. I don't know what to say, she admitted. You don't have to say anything. Dominic smiled gently. I just wanted you to understand that helping you tonight wasn't some random act of charity. You helped me once without even knowing it. I'm just returning the favor. This is more than a favor. Then let's call it the beginning of something. Dominic hesitated, then added, if you want it to be. Before Sanaa could process what he meant, the balcony doors opened and a man stepped out. He was tall and lean with light brown skin and a friendly face. He wore a charcoal gray suit and carried 2 champagne flutes. There you are, the man said, grinning at Dominic. Amara said I'd find you hiding out here. His gaze shifted to Sanaa with open curiosity. And you've got company. I don't believe we've met. Julian, this is Sanaa Washington. Sanaa, Julian Reeves, my business partner and the one who handles all the actual work while I take credit for it. Julian laughed and offered one of the champagne flutes to Sanaa. Don't let him fool you. Dom works harder than anyone I know. It's nice to meet you, Sanaa. Sanaa accepted the glass with a quiet thank you. Julian took a sip from his own glass and leaned against the railing, looking completely at ease. So how do you two know each other? Julian asked. I don't think I've seen Dom actually relax around someone new in, well, ever. Dominic shot his friend a look that was half amused, half warning. We just met tonight, actually. Really? Julian's eyebrows rose. Could have fooled me. You two look like old friends. Sanaa felt herself blushing and took a sip of champagne to hide it. The bubbles fizzed pleasantly on her tongue. Julian, do you remember that coffee cup I keep on my desk? Dominic asked. The one with the message? The tomorrow will be better cup? You've only mentioned it about 1,000 times. Julian's eyes suddenly widened as he looked between them. Wait. No way. Sanaa worked at Rosie's Cafe 3 years ago. You're kidding. Julian stared at Sanaa with something like awe. You're the woman who wrote that? Dom's been talking about you for years. He even hired a private investigator to try to find you. Julian, Dominic said with exasperation. But Sanaa was focused on what Julian had just revealed. You tried to find me? Dominic ran a hand over his beard, looking slightly embarrassed. I wanted to thank you properly. But by the time I had the resources to search, the trail was cold. The cafe didn't keep detailed employment records. I had nothing to go on. Sanaa's mind was spinning. This man, this successful, powerful man, had spent 3 years thinking about her, searching for her. And she'd been trapped in a marriage to Trevor, feeling invisible and worthless. This is like something out of a movie, Julian said, grinning. You two are giving me all kinds of hope and fate and destiny right now. We should probably get back inside, Dominic said, though he didn't sound enthusiastic about the idea. People will wonder where I disappeared to. Let them wonder, Julian said cheerfully. You've earned a night off from schmoozing. He pushed away from the railing. I'll go run interference with the board members. You two stay here and catch up properly. He winked at Sanaa. It's really good to meet you. I have a feeling we're going to be seeing a lot more of each other. With that, Julian disappeared back inside, leaving them alone again. Sanaa turned to Dominic. He seems nice. He's the best friend anyone could ask for. Annoying but loyal. Dominic smiled. Are you warm enough out here? I can get your coat if you need it. I'm fine. Sanaa paused. Actually, that's not true. I'm overwhelmed and confused and I don't understand how this is happening, but I'm not cold. Dominic moved a little closer. What are you overwhelmed about? This. The fact that I grabbed a stranger's hand and he turned out to be someone whose life I apparently touched years ago. The fact that you tried to find me. The fact that you helped me without even thinking about it. Sanaa shook her head. I've spent the last 3 years feeling like I don't matter to anyone. And then tonight. You matter, Dominic said quietly. You've always mattered. The intensity in his voice made Sanaa's eyes burn with unshed tears again. She blinked them back quickly. I should probably tell you that my life is a mess right now, she said, trying for honesty. My almost ex-husband is clearly not going to leave me alone. I live in a tiny apartment that I can barely afford. I'm trying to rebuild everything from scratch. I'm not in a place to offer anyone anything right now. I'm not asking you for anything, Dominic said. But I would like to help if you'll let me. Starting with making sure your ex-husband understands that he needs to stay away from you. I don't want to be a charity case. You're not. You're someone who showed me kindness when I needed it most. Let me return that kindness. Please. The please got her. There was no demand in it, no expectation. Just a genuine request. Sanaa found herself nodding. Okay. But I don't really know what that means. It means I'd like to drive you home tonight, make sure you get there safely. And then, if you're willing, I'd like to take you to coffee tomorrow. Just coffee, just talking. We can figure out the rest as we go. Coffee. Talking. It sounded simple and safe and absolutely terrifying. Sanaa hadn't been on a real date in over 4 years. She didn't know how to do this, how to trust someone new. But as she looked at Dominic, at the patience and hope in his eyes, she found herself wanting to try. Just coffee, she agreed. Dominic's answering smile was radiant. Just coffee. They stayed on the balcony for another hour talking about everything and nothing. Dominic asked about her work with the kids at the community center, and Sanaa found herself opening up about the teenagers she mentored, the small victories and hard challenges. He asked about her family and she told him about her mother in Spokane who she talked to every Sunday, her younger brother who was stationed overseas with the Navy. In turn, Dominic shared stories about growing up with Amara, about his father's legacy and the pressure of living up to it, about the slow process of taking Hayes Global from near bankruptcy to the thriving enterprise it was today. He was funny and self-deprecating and obviously brilliant, but he never made her feel less than or talk down to her. When they finally went back inside, the gala was winding down. Dominic found Sanaa's coat and helped her into it, his hands gentle on her shoulders. He introduced her to several more people, always keeping her close, always making sure she felt included in the conversations. Trevor didn't approach them again. Sanaa caught sight of him once, glaring at them from across the room, but he kept his distance. When it was time to leave, Dominic walked her to his car, a sleek black Mercedes that probably cost more than Sanaa made in 3 years. He opened the passenger door for her and waited until she was settled before closing it gently. The drive to her apartment in the Central District was quiet and comfortable. Dominic didn't press her for conversation, just let soft music play from the speakers while the city lights flashed by the windows. When he pulled up outside her building, a modest 4-story structure with faded blue siding, he put the car in park and turned to her. "Thank you for trusting me tonight," he said. "Thank you for being trustworthy." Sanaa unbuckled her seatbelt but didn't immediately move to get out. "About tomorrow's coffee. Are you serious about that?" "Completely serious. If you're still willing." Sanaa thought about all the reasons she should say no. She was still technically married. Her life was complicated. She barely knew this man. But then she thought about how safe she'd felt all evening, how seen and valued. She thought about a coffee cup with a message of hope and the strange, impossible way the universe had brought them back together. "I'm willing," she said softly. Dominic's smile could have lit up the entire city. He pulled out his phone. "Can I get your number?" They exchanged information, and then Dominic insisted on walking her to her door. Her apartment was on the 2nd floor, and he waited while she unlocked it, making sure she got inside safely. "Lock the door behind you," he said gently. "I will." "And Sanaa." He waited until she looked at him. If your ex-husband shows up here or if he contacts you, call me immediately. Anytime, day or night. Promise me. The protectiveness in his voice stirred something warm in Sanaa's chest. I promise. Good. I'll text you in the morning about coffee. Sanaa nodded and stepped inside, closing the door gently. She locked it, then leaned against it, her heart racing. Through the door, she heard Dominic's footsteps retreat down the hallway. She went to her window and watched as he emerged from the building, got into his car and drove away. Only then did she let out the breath she'd been holding. Her phone buzzed almost immediately. A text from an unknown number, tomorrow will be better. But tonight was already pretty wonderful. Sleep well, Sanaa. She saved his contact information and texted back. Thank you for everything. Good night, Dominic. His reply came within seconds. Good night. Sanaa got ready for bed in a daze, her mind replaying the entire evening. She'd gone to the gala terrified and alone, and she'd come home feeling like the world had shifted on its axis. As she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling of her small bedroom, she couldn't help but wonder if this was real. If a man like Dominic Hayes could really be interested in someone like her. If fate really had orchestrated this impossible reunion. But then she thought about his eyes when he'd looked at her, the gentleness in his hands, the way he'd said her name. And she found herself believing just a little, that maybe tomorrow really could be better. Maybe it could be wonderful. Sanaa woke to sunlight streaming through her bedroom window and the ping of a text message. She reached for her phone, still groggy, and felt her heart skip when she saw Dominic's name. Good morning. There's a cafe called Espresso Haven on Madison Street. Does 11 o'clock work for you? She glanced at her alarm clock. 9:30. She had plenty of time. 11 is perfect, she texted back, then forced herself out of bed. After a quick shower, Sanaa stood in front of her closet trying to decide what to wear. She didn't have many choices. Most of her nice clothes had been left behind when she'd fled her marriage, grabbing only what she could fit in 2 suitcases. Trevor had controlled their finances, and she'd been rebuilding her wardrobe slowly on her modest salary. She finally settled on dark jeans and a soft blue sweater, pairing them with the brown boots her mother had sent her for her birthday. Simple but neat. She twisted her natural curls into a high bun, applied minimal makeup, and studied herself in the mirror. She looked nervous. But also for the first time in a long time she looked hopeful. Her phone rang just as she was grabbing her purse. Patricia Morgan's name flashed on the screen. Hello. Sanaa, good morning. Patricia's voice was warm. I wanted to thank you for representing the center so well last night. Several board members from Hayes Global specifically mentioned meeting you. Sanaa felt her cheeks warm. That's kind of them. I also heard through the grapevine that you spent quite a bit of time with Dominic Hayes himself. That's quite an impression to make. Sanaa wasn't sure what to say to that. He was very kind. He's also famously private and selective about his company. The fact that he spent his own gala with you instead of networking with donors says something. Patricia paused. I don't mean to pry into your personal life, Sanaa. I just want you to know that you deserve good things. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise. The words hit Sanaa harder than they should have. Patricia knew about her divorce, though not the details of why. She'd been nothing but supportive during the transition. Thank you, Patricia. That means a lot. Have a wonderful Sunday. I'll see you Monday. After they hung up, Sanaa checked the time. 10:30. She needed to leave. Espresso Haven turned out to be a cozy cafe with brick walls, mismatched furniture, and the rich smell of coffee beans. Dominic was already there when Sanaa arrived, sitting at a small table near the window. He wore dark jeans and a green sweater, looking more relaxed than he had in his suit last night, but no less attractive. He stood when he saw her, his face breaking into a smile. You found it okay? Your directions were perfect. Sanaa slid into the chair across from him. A barista came over and they both ordered. Sanaa got a latte and Dominic ordered black coffee. So, Dominic said once they were alone again, how did you sleep? Better than I have in months actually. You. Same. I kept thinking about last night, making sure it was real and not something I'd imagined. Sanaa laughed softly. I had the same thought. Their drinks arrived and Sanaa wrapped her hands around the warm ceramic mug, letting the heat seep into her palms. Dominic watched her with that same intense focus he'd had last night, like she was the only person in the world who mattered. Tell me something about yourself, he said. Something I wouldn't learn from a background check. You ran a background check on me? Sanaa asked, startled. No, Dominic said quickly. I meant hypothetically. I would never invade your privacy like that. I'm just asking you to tell me something real, something you choose to share. Sana relaxed. Okay. Something real. She thought for a moment. I wanted to be a teacher when I was younger. Elementary school. I loved the idea of shaping young minds, you know? But then I got married right out of college and Trevor convinced me that teaching didn't pay enough, that I should find something more practical. So I ended up doing administrative work instead. It wasn't until I started volunteering at the community center 2 years ago that I realized I could still work with kids, just in a different way. Do you enjoy it? The work at the center? I love it. Those kids, they're dealing with so much. Poverty, violence, absent parents, unstable housing. But they're also funny and creative and resilient. When one of them has a breakthrough, when they realize they can succeed at something, it makes everything worth it. Dominic's expression was soft. You're doing exactly what you were meant to do then. Just not in a classroom. Maybe. What about you? Did you always want to run your father's company? No, Dominic admitted. I wanted to be an architect. I loved the idea of designing spaces where people could live and work and feel inspired. I was actually in graduate school for architecture when my father got sick. He'd had a minor heart attack and it scared him. He asked me to come work with him to learn the business. I thought it would be temporary, that I'd eventually go back to my own plans. But then he died and suddenly I was running everything. Do you regret it? Dominic considered this. Sometimes. I wonder what my life would have looked like if I'd finished my degree, if I'd opened my own firm. But then I think about the people Hayes Global employs, the communities we invest in, the difference we can make. It's not what I planned, but it matters. So no, I don't regret it. They talked for 2 hours, their coffee growing cold as they got lost in conversation. Sana told him about growing up in Spokane, about her close relationship with her mother and the way her father had left when she was 12. Dominic shared stories about his childhood with Amara, about being raised by a single father who worked too much but loved deeply. When the cafe started filling with the lunch crowd, Dominic suggested they take a walk. They ended up at a nearby park, strolling along paved paths lined with bare trees and the last remnants of autumn leaves. Can I ask you something? Dominic said as they walked. And please tell me if it's too personal. Okay. Your ex-husband last night. How long was he like that? Controlling, I mean. Sana was quiet for a moment, trying to figure out how to explain 3 years of gradual suffocation. It didn't start that way. When we first met, Trevor was charming and attentive. He made me feel special. We got married quickly, maybe too quickly. And then, slowly things changed. He started making all the decisions about where we lived, how we spent money, who I could see. If I disagreed with him, he'd get angry. Not violent, but intimidating. He'd yell or give me the silent treatment for days or tell me I was stupid and ungrateful. Dominic's jaw tightened, but he didn't interrupt. I lost myself in that marriage, Sana continued. I quit my job because he said I should. I stopped seeing my friends because he said they were a bad influence. I became smaller and smaller until I almost didn't recognize myself anymore. And the worst part is, I let it happen. I kept thinking if I just tried harder, if I was better, things would go back to how they were in the beginning. That's not your fault, Dominic said firmly. You know that, right? What he did, that's on him. Not you. Logically, I know that. But emotionally. Sana shrugged. It's harder to believe. What made you finally leave? Sana smiled sadly. My mother. She came to visit unannounced and saw how bad things had gotten. She literally packed my bags while Trevor was at work and drove me to a women's shelter. She said she wasn't going to watch her daughter disappear. That night was 6 months ago and I've been rebuilding ever since. Your mother sounds like a strong woman. She is. I get my stubbornness from her. They walked in comfortable silence for a few minutes. Then Dominic said, I meant what I said last night. If he keeps bothering you, I can help. I have lawyers on retainer. We can file for a restraining order, expedite the divorce, whatever you need. Sana stopped walking and turned to face him. Why are you being so nice to me? And please don't say it's because of a coffee cup message from 3 years ago. There has to be more to it than that. Dominic met her gaze steadily. The truth? That message came at a moment when I was questioning everything. My worth, my abilities, whether I could handle the responsibilities I'd inherited. You didn't know me, you had no reason to care, but you took the time to offer hope to a stranger. That kindness, that belief that tomorrow could be better, it changed my trajectory. So yes, part of why I'm helping is gratitude. But it's also because I see you, Sana. I see how hard you're working to rebuild your life, how much you care about the kids you mentor, how strong you are even when you don't feel like it. You deserve someone in your corner. Let me be that person. Sanaa felt tears prickling her eyes for what felt like the 100th time since meeting this man. I'm not used to people being kind without wanting something in return. I'm not looking for anything except maybe the chance to get to know you better. At whatever pace you're comfortable with. Even if that pace is really slow? Even then. Sanaa found herself smiling through her tears. Okay. Then yes, I'd appreciate your help with the legal stuff. And I'd like to get to know you better too. Dominic's answering smile was brilliant. Good. Let's start with lunch. Are you hungry? They ended up at a small Thai restaurant where Dominic insisted on ordering half the menu so Sanaa could try different things. He asked more questions about her work, about the specific programs at the community center, and listened with genuine interest as she described the after-school curriculum she'd helped develop. When Sanaa's phone buzzed with a text, she glanced at it and felt her stomach drop. Trevor. We need to talk. I'll be at your apartment at 7. Her hands started shaking. Dominic noticed immediately. What's wrong? Silently, Sanaa showed him the phone. Dominic's expression went hard. You're not meeting with him. And he's not going to your apartment. I can't just ignore him. He'll show up anyway. Then you won't be there. You'll be somewhere safe. Dominic pulled out his own phone. I'm calling my lawyer right now. We're filing for an emergency restraining order this afternoon. On a Sunday? I know a judge who owes me a favor. He'll sign it. Sanaa watched as Dominic made the call, his voice calm and authoritative as he explained the situation. Within 10 minutes, he'd arranged for his lawyer to meet them at his office in an hour. What about my apartment? Sanaa asked. He might actually come at 7 like he said. I'll have my security team there. They'll inform him that he's in violation of a restraining order and that the police will be called if he doesn't leave immediately. You have a security team? I do. And right now, they're going to make sure your ex-husband understands that he can't harass you anymore. The afternoon was a whirlwind. Dominic's lawyer, a sharp woman named Vanessa Chen, met them at the Hayes Global building and walked Sanaa through the process of filing for the restraining order. She documented every instance of Trevor's harassment that Sanaa could remember, including last night's confrontation at the gala. By 5 o'clock, they had a temporary restraining order signed by Judge Mitchell. The permanent hearing would be scheduled for the following week, but in the meantime, Trevor was legally required to stay at least 500 feet away from Sanaa. I'll have this served to him first thing tomorrow morning, Vanessa said, gathering her papers. In the meantime, if he violates it, call the police immediately. After Vanessa left, Sanaa sat in one of the leather chairs in Dominic's office and tried to process everything that had just happened. In less than 24 hours, her entire life had shifted. Dominic sat on the edge of his desk, watching her with concern. How are you feeling? Overwhelmed. Grateful. Scared. All of it at once. That's understandable. Do you want to go back to your apartment tonight, or would you feel safer somewhere else? Sanaa thought about it. The idea of being alone when Trevor might show up terrified her, restraining order or not. But she also didn't want to impose on Dominic more than she already had. I should probably go home, she said, trying to sound braver than she felt. Or, Dominic said carefully, you could stay at my place. I have several guest rooms. You'd have complete privacy and you wouldn't have to worry about Trevor showing up. My building has excellent security. I can't ask you to do that. You're not asking. I'm offering. Please, Sanaa. It would give me peace of mind knowing you're safe. The genuine worry in his voice made her decision easier. Okay. Thank you. But I'll need to get some things from my apartment first. We'll go together. My security team will make sure it's safe. They arrived at Sanaa's apartment at 6:30, accompanied by 2 members of Dominic's security team. The building was quiet and there was no sign of Trevor. Sanaa quickly packed a bag with clothes and toiletries while Dominic waited in her small living room. She was throwing her toothbrush into her bag when her phone rang. Trevor. She ignored it, but a moment later a text came through. Where are you? I'm outside your building. Sanaa's hands started shaking again. She walked out to the living room where Dominic was looking at the framed photos on her bookshelf. He's here, she said quietly. Dominic's expression hardened. He spoke into the phone clipped to his jacket. What's the status outside? A voice crackled back. There's a white male approximately 6 feet tall, standing on the sidewalk across the street. He appears to be watching the building. That matches the description of Trevor Mitchell. Make sure he doesn't enter the building. If he tries, inform him about the restraining order and call the police. Understood. Dominic turned back to Sanaa. You're safe. You can't get in. Are you finished packing? Sanaa nodded, shouldering her bag. They left through the back entrance of the building where Dominic's car was waiting. As they pulled away, Sanaa caught a glimpse of Trevor across the street, his face twisted with anger as he watched them drive off. She shuddered. "He can't hurt you anymore," Dominic said quietly. "I promise." Sanaa wanted to believe him. But she'd lived with Trevor's control for so long that freedom still felt fragile, like something that could be snatched away at any moment. Dominic's penthouse was on the 40th floor of a sleek glass building downtown. The elevator required a key card to access the top floors, and when the doors opened directly into his foyer, Sanaa's breath caught. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Seattle's skyline. The furniture was modern but comfortable, all clean lines in shades of cream and navy blue. Everything was immaculate, clearly expensive, but somehow the space still felt warm, lived in. "This is beautiful," Sanaa said, setting her bag down. "Thank you. Let me show you to your room." He led her down a hallway to a spacious guest bedroom with its own bathroom. The bed was huge, covered in a fluffy white comforter, and there were fresh flowers on the dresser. "Amara keeps this room stocked for when she stays over," Dominic explained. "There should be anything you need, but if not, just let me know." "This is perfect. Thank you, Dominic. For everything." He smiled. "Get settled. I'll order dinner. Any preferences?" "I'm not picky. Italian okay?" "Perfect." After he left, Sanaa sat on the edge of the bed and tried to absorb the surreality of her situation. 24 hours ago she'd been dreading a gala. Now she was staying in a billionaire's penthouse, protected by his security team, because he'd recognized her as the woman who'd once written an encouraging message on his coffee cup. Her life had become something out of a story. She unpacked her few things, freshened up in the luxurious bathroom, and emerged to find Dominic in the kitchen. He'd changed into comfortable gray sweatpants and a black t-shirt, and he was pulling wine glasses from a cabinet. "Food should be here in 20 minutes. Red or white?" "Red, please." He poured them each a glass and they sat at the kitchen island, the city lights twinkling beyond the windows. "Can I ask you something?" Sanaa said after a moment. "Always. Do you do this often? Rescue women and bring them home?" Dominic laughed. "No. You're the first. And just to be clear, I don't think of this as rescuing you. You're rescuing yourself. I'm just providing some support while you do it." "That's a nice way to put it." "It's the true way to put it." Dominic studied her over his wine glass. "You're one of the strongest people I've ever met, Sanaa. You left an abusive marriage, you're rebuilding your life from scratch, and you're still showing up every day to help kids who need you. That takes courage." Sanaa felt her throat tighten. "I don't feel courageous. Most days I feel like I'm barely holding it together." Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's moving forward despite it. They talked through dinner, which turned out to be amazing pasta from an upscale Italian place. Dominic asked about her family, and Sanaa found herself telling stories about her mother's stubborn kindness and her brother's terrible jokes. Around 10 o'clock, Sanaa's exhaustion caught up with her. Dominic noticed her yawning and immediately insisted she get some rest. "If you need anything during the night, my room is at the end of the hall," he said as they stood. "Don't hesitate to wake me." "Thank you. For all of this." "You've already thanked me enough." Dominic hesitated, then added, "Sleep well, Sanaa. Tomorrow really will be better." In the guest room, Sanaa changed into pajamas and climbed into the most comfortable bed she'd ever experienced. She expected to lie awake worrying about Trevor, about restraining orders, about the surreal turn her life had taken. But instead, surrounded by soft sheets and the distant glow of city lights, feeling safer than she had in years, Sanaa fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of new routines and small moments that slowly built into something significant. Sanaa went back to work at the community center on Monday, and Dominic's lawyer successfully served Trevor with the restraining order that same morning. Trevor made one attempt to call Sanaa, which she documented and reported, but otherwise stayed away. The permanent restraining order hearing was scheduled for Wednesday of the following week. In the meantime, Sanaa stayed at Dominic's penthouse. She'd initially planned to stay just one night, but Dominic had gently insisted she remain until after the hearing, and truthfully, Sanaa felt safer there. She had her own space, her own key card, and Dominic was the perfect host, respectful of her privacy but always available if she needed anything. They fell into an easy rhythm. Dominic left early for work but always made sure there was fresh coffee waiting for Sanaa. She'd get ready and head to the community center, spending her days with the teenagers she mentored. In the evenings, she and Dominic would meet back at the penthouse and cook dinner together, Or sometimes Dominic would bring home takeout from whatever restaurant he'd been near. They talked endlessly. About everything and nothing. Sanaa learned that Dominic was an early riser who ran 5 miles every morning, that he had a weakness for terrible action movies, that he was fiercely protective of his younger sister. Dominic learned that Sanaa hummed while she cooked, that she read romance novels before bed, that she had strong opinions about the proper way to make grilled cheese. It was domestic and comfortable and absolutely nothing like Sanaa's marriage had been. With Trevor, she'd walked on eggshells, constantly monitoring his moods, trying to prevent his anger. With Dominic, she could just be herself. He never criticized her, never made her feel small. When they disagreed about something, which happened occasionally, they talked it through calmly. Amara visited twice during those 2 weeks, joining them for dinner. She was warm and funny and clearly delighted by Sanaa's presence in her brother's life. "I've never seen him this happy," Amara told Sanaa one evening when Dominic was in his office taking a call. "He's always been so serious, so focused on work. But with you he actually relaxes. It's nice to see." The restraining order hearing went smoothly. Vanessa presented the evidence of Trevor's harassment, and Sanaa testified about the years of emotional abuse and his recent stalking behavior. Trevor's lawyer tried to paint Sanaa as vindictive, but the judge wasn't swayed. The permanent restraining order was granted, valid for 3 years. When they left the courthouse, Sanaa felt like she could finally breathe. Trevor couldn't contact her, couldn't come near her. He was finally, truly out of her life. Dominic took her to lunch to celebrate at a cozy bistro in Capitol Hill. They sat in a booth in the back and Dominic raised his water glass. "To new beginnings," he said. "To new beginnings," Sanaa echoed, clinking her glass against his. After lunch, they walked through the neighborhood, browsing bookstores and art galleries. It was a Friday afternoon, and the streets were busy with people enjoying the unseasonably warm November weather. "So," Dominic said as they walked, "now that the restraining order is in place, you're probably ready to move back to your own apartment." Sanaa felt a pang of disappointment at the thought. She'd grown to love staying at the penthouse, but more than that, she'd grown to love the time she spent with Dominic. The early morning coffee conversations, the late-night movie marathons, the comfortable silences. "I suppose I should," she said, trying to sound practical. "I've imposed on you long enough." "You haven't imposed at all." Dominic stopped walking and turned to face her. "Actually, I have a proposal. And before you say no, just hear me out." "Okay." Hayes Global is expanding our community outreach program. We want to replicate the success we've had with places like Rainier Community Center and other neighborhoods throughout the city. We need someone to coordinate the effort, someone who understands the work from the ground level, who has relationships with the communities we want to serve. "I'd like to offer you that position." Sanaa stared at him. "Are you serious?" "Completely. The salary would be significantly higher than what you make now, enough that you could afford a better apartment in a safer neighborhood. You'd have an actual budget to work with, the ability to hire staff, the resources to really make a difference. Patricia has already agreed to let you transition out of your current role if you want the job." "You talked to Patricia?" "I talked to her about the possibility. She thinks you'd be perfect for it." Dominic paused. "But I need you to know that this offer is legitimate. It's not some ploy to keep you close or to make you feel obligated to me. I'm offering you this job because you're the best person for it, because I've seen your work and I believe in what you can do. If you take it, you'll report to Julian, not to me, so there's no weird power dynamic. And if you decide you don't want it, or if you'd rather find something else, that's completely fine. I just wanted you to know the opportunity exists." Sanaa's mind was racing. A better salary. More resources. The chance to expand the work she loved to more kids and more neighborhoods. Sounded too good to be true. "What if it doesn't work out?" she asked. "What if I'm not good at the job? Then we'd figure it out together like any employer and employee." "But Sanaa, I don't think that's going to happen. I've watched you. I've seen how the kids at your center light up when you walk into a room, how the other staff members respect your ideas. You're a natural leader. You just need someone to give you the chance to prove it." Sanaa felt tears prickling her eyes. Trevor had spent 3 years telling her she wasn't smart enough, capable enough, special enough. And here was Dominic, offering her not just a job but a vote of confidence in her abilities. "Can I think about it?" she asked. "Of course. Take all the time you need." They continued walking, but Sanaa's mind was already turning over the possibilities. She could move out of her tiny apartment with the leaky faucet and the neighbors who fought loudly at 3 in the morning. She could actually save money, maybe even visit her mother more often. She could help more kids, expand the programs that she knew made a difference. It was everything she'd wanted but hadn't dared to hope for. That evening, Dominic made reservations at a small Italian restaurant tucked away on a quiet street in Ballard. It was the kind of place with checkered tablecloths, candles and wine bottles, and the smell of garlic and fresh bread. They were seated at a corner table and Dominic ordered a bottle of red wine. The conversation flowed easily as it always did, moving from funny stories about Dominic's college days to Sanaa's memories of growing up with a mischievous younger brother. But as dessert arrived, a rich chocolate cake they decided to share, the mood shifted slightly. Dominic set down his fork and looked at Sanaa with an intensity that made her breath catch. "There's something I need to tell you," he said. "And I've been putting it off because I didn't want to make you uncomfortable, but I think you deserve to know." Sanaa's heart rate picked up. "Okay." "That day at Rosie's Cafe when you wrote that message on my coffee cup, it wasn't just a nice moment that I remember fondly. It was a turning point. My father had just died and I was drowning. I felt like I was failing at everything. The company was hemorrhaging money, I was making decisions I wasn't qualified to make, and I was so exhausted I couldn't see straight. I was walking to a meeting with our creditors, trying to figure out how to tell them we couldn't make payroll, and I stopped for coffee because I needed something, anything to keep me going." He paused, his gaze distant as he remembered. "You were working the register. You looked tired too, like you were carrying your own weight. But when you saw me you smiled. And it wasn't a fake customer service smile. It was genuine. You asked if I was okay and I lied and said I was fine. But I don't think you believed me because when you handed me my coffee, you'd written, 'Tomorrow will be better,' on the cup, and you'd drawn a little sunrise next to it." Sanaa did remember now vividly. She remembered the man in the expensive but wrinkled suit, the defeat in his eyes. She'd wanted to help more but hadn't known how, so she'd settled for a small gesture. "I took that cup to my meeting," Dominic continued. "And I looked at those words while the creditors told me everything that was going wrong. And something shifted. I stopped focusing on all the ways I was failing and started thinking about what I could do differently. I restructured our debt, I cut costs, I took risks that could have backfired but didn't. Slowly, painfully, I turned things around. And through all of it, I kept that cup on my desk as a reminder that even in the darkest moments, tomorrow could be better." He leaned forward slightly. "But more than that, I kept thinking about you. The woman who'd shown kindness to a stranger for no reason except that she wanted to help. I went back to that cafe every week for months hoping to see you again. I wanted to thank you, to tell you what your words had meant. But you were never there and eventually I learned you'd quit. I tried to find you but I didn't even know your name. All I had was the memory of a kind smile and a message of hope." Sanaa's throat was tight. "I had no idea. How could you? But Sanaa, when you grabbed my hand at that gala, when I turned around and saw you, I couldn't believe it. After 3 years of wondering, 3 years of looking, there you were. And you needed help. It felt like fate was giving me the chance to return the kindness you'd shown me. So that's why you've been so good to me," Sanaa said quietly. "Because you feel like you owe me." "No." Dominic reached across the table and took her hand. "At first, yes. I wanted to help because I was grateful. But these past 2 weeks, getting to know you, spending time with you, it's become so much more than gratitude. Sanaa, I'm falling for you. The real you, not some idealized memory. I love your laugh, the way you care so deeply about your kids at the center, the way you hum when you cook, the way you argue with me about movies even though your taste is clearly wrong." Despite the emotion of the moment, Sanaa laughed. "My taste is not wrong. You just like explosions too much. See, this is what I mean." Dominic smiled, but his eyes were serious. "I love every moment I spend with you. And I needed you to know that before you decide about the job, before anything else happens between us. My feelings for you aren't contingent on you working for Hayes Global or staying in my penthouse or anything else. I just need you to know that they exist." Sanaa's heart was pounding. She'd known she was developing feelings for Dominic, but she'd told herself it was gratitude, admiration, the natural affection that comes from spending time with someone kind. But hearing him say he was falling for her made her realize the truth. She was falling for him too. "I don't know what to say," she admitted. "This whole thing, it feels like a dream. Like I'm going to wake up and be back in my old life, and none of this will have happened." "It's real," Dominic said. "I'm real. What I feel for you is real." "I'm scared," Sanaa confessed. "My last relationship destroyed me, Dominic. I lost myself. I don't know how to do this, how to trust someone again." "Then we'll take it slow. As slow as you need. I'm not going anywhere, Sanaa. I've waited 3 years to find you. I can wait as long as it takes for you to be ready." Sanaa looked at their joined hands, at the way his fingers wrapped around hers so gently, so carefully. She thought about the past 2 weeks, about how safe she'd felt, how valued. She thought about Dominic's patience, his kindness, the way he listened when she talked and respected her boundaries without question. And she thought about the woman she used to be, the one who'd written hope on a coffee cup for a stranger. She'd forgotten that version of herself somewhere in the darkness of her marriage. But maybe with Dominic she could find her way back. "I'm falling for you too," she said quietly. "I've been trying to convince myself it's too soon or too complicated. But I can't help it." Dominic's smile was radiant. He lifted her hand and pressed a kiss to her knuckles, the gesture so tender it made Sanaa's eyes sting with tears. "We don't have to figure everything out tonight," he said. "We can just take it one day at a time." "One day at a time," Sanaa repeated. "I can do that." They finished their dessert, lingering over the last of the wine. When they finally left the restaurant, Dominic took her hand as they walked to his car, and Sanaa didn't pull away. It felt right, natural, like their hands were made to fit together. Back at the penthouse, they sat on the couch with mugs of tea, the city lights spreading out before them through the floor-to-ceiling windows. "Can I tell you something?" Sanaa said. "Something I've been thinking about?" "Anything." "That day at the cafe when I wrote that message, I was having the worst day. Trevor had just told me I needed to quit my job because working as a barista was embarrassing for him. He wanted me to stay home to focus on being a good wife. I'd fought with him about it that morning, and he told me I was selfish for wanting to work instead of supporting his career. I was heartbroken and angry, and I felt so trapped." She took a sip of her tea. "You came in looking so sad, and I remember thinking that at least I could try to make one person's day a little better, even if I couldn't fix my own situation. Writing that message, it was as much for me as it was for you. It was a reminder that I could still offer something good to the world, even if my world felt dark." Dominic was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "You saved me that day. But maybe in a way I could save you too. Not from Trevor, not from your circumstances. But maybe I could remind you of what I've seen so clearly. You're extraordinary, Sanaa. You always have been. You just need to believe it." Sanaa set down her tea and turned to face him. "When I grabbed your hand at the gala, I thought I was just trying to escape. But maybe I was also trying to hold on to something better. Something hopeful." "And did you find it?" Dominic asked softly. Sanaa looked at him, at the warmth in his eyes, the gentle smile on his lips. She thought about everything that had happened in the past 2 weeks, all the small kindnesses and big gestures, all the ways he'd shown her what it meant to be truly cared for. "Yes," she said. "I think I did." Dominic reached up and brushed a curl away from her face, his touch feather light. "Can I kiss you?" he asked. Sanaa's breath caught. She nodded, unable to speak. Dominic leaned in slowly, giving her time to change her mind, time to pull away. But Sanaa didn't want to pull away. She wanted this, wanted him, wanted to believe in the possibility of something beautiful after so much darkness. Their lips met in the softest kiss, tentative and sweet. Dominic's hand cupped her cheek, and Sanaa's eyes fluttered closed as she leaned into him. It was gentle and careful and absolutely nothing like the rough, demanding kisses Trevor had given her. This kiss felt like a promise. Like hope made tangible. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing a little harder, Dominic rested his forehead against hers. "Tomorrow will be better," he whispered. "It already is," Sanaa whispered back. They stayed on the couch for another hour, talking and laughing and stealing occasional kisses. When Sanaa finally went to bed that night, she lay in the comfortable guest room and thought about how much her life had changed in such a short time. 2 weeks ago she'd been terrified and alone, running from a man who'd tried to control her. Now she was falling in love with a man who wanted to see her flourish, who believed in her potential, who made her feel like she could be herself without fear. It was almost too much to believe. But as she drifted off to sleep, Sanaa let herself hope that maybe, just maybe, fairy tales could come true. Even for someone like her. Sanaa accepted the job. It took her 3 days of thinking, of making pros and cons lists, of talking it through with her mother over the phone. But ultimately the opportunity was too good to pass up. She wanted to help more kids. She wanted to make a real difference. And she was ready to bet on herself. Dominic's face when she told him was pure joy. He'd hugged her tight, lifting her off her feet slightly, and then immediately insisted they celebrate. Her official start date was set for the Monday after Thanksgiving, which gave her 2 weeks to transition out of her role at Rainier Community Center and to find a new apartment. The salary increase was substantial, and Sanaa spent her lunch breaks looking at listings for places in safer neighborhoods with actual amenities. She settled on a 1-bedroom apartment in the Fremont area with big windows and a small balcony. It was more than twice the size of her old place, and when she signed the lease she felt a surge of pride. This was hers. She'd earned it. Dominic helped her move in the weekend before Thanksgiving. He showed up with Julian and a rented truck, and the three of them carried boxes up 2 flights of stairs while debating the best pizza toppings. "Pineapple on pizza is a crime against humanity," Julian declared as they assembled her bed frame. "It's sweet and savory perfection," Sanaa countered, laughing at his expression of mock horror. "I'm staying out of this," Dominic said, holding up his hands. "But for the record, Sanaa's right." "Traitor," Julian muttered, but he was grinning. Once everything was moved in, Julian left to meet his girlfriend for dinner, and Sanaa and Dominic ordered Chinese takeout and ate it sitting on her new couch, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes. "I still can't believe this is mine," Sanaa said, looking around the apartment. "A month ago I was barely scraping by." "You worked for this," Dominic reminded her. "This is all you, Sanaa. With a little help from a billionaire who happened to need a community outreach coordinator." "Lucky coincidence." Dominic winked and Sanaa threw a fortune cookie at him. They spent the evening unpacking, setting up her kitchen, hanging pictures on the walls. It was domestic and comfortable, and Sanaa loved every minute of it. Dominic didn't try to take over or tell her where things should go. He just helped where she directed and made her laugh with stories about his own disastrous first apartment after college. When everything was mostly in order, they collapsed on the couch again. It was close to midnight, and Sanaa's muscles ached from all the lifting and arranging. "Thank you for today," she said, leaning her head on Dominic's shoulder. "You didn't have to spend your entire Saturday helping me move." "I wanted to." Dominic pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "Besides, Julian would have killed me if I'd made him do it alone." Sanaa laughed. Over the past few weeks she'd gotten to know Julian better. He was funny and genuine, and his friendship with Dominic was clearly built on years of mutual respect and trust. She liked him immensely. "He's a good friend," Sanaa said. "The best. He's been with me through everything. When my father died, Julian was the one who kept me sane. He'd show up at my apartment with food and terrible movies and refuse to leave until I'd eaten something and laughed at least once. That's the kind of friend everyone needs." "It is." Dominic was quiet for a moment, then said, "I want you to meet more of my family. Properly, I mean. Amara's already half in love with you, but I have aunts and cousins who'd like to meet the woman who's taken up residence in my thoughts." Sanaa's heart did a little flip. "Taken up residence?" "Completely moved in," Dominic confirmed. "I think about you constantly. When I'm in meetings, when I'm running in the mornings, when I'm supposed to be reviewing contracts. It's becoming a problem." "A problem?" "A wonderful problem." Dominic shifted so he could look at her. "I know we're taking things slow and I respect that. But I also want you to know that this is real for me, Sanaa. You're not just someone I'm dating casually. I'm serious about you, about us." Sanaa felt a flutter of nerves mixed with excitement. "I'm serious about us too. But I'm also still figuring out how to do this, how to be in a relationship that's healthy. Sometimes I catch myself waiting for the other shoe to drop, expecting you to suddenly change or get angry or tell me I'm doing everything wrong. And when that happens, I have to remind myself that you're not Trevor, that you've never given me a reason to doubt you." Sanaa took his hand. "I'm working on it. I promise. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere." They kissed, slow and deep, and Sanaa felt the warmth of it all the way to her toes. Every kiss with Dominic was like this, full of care and intention, like he was trying to show her with touch what he felt in his heart. When they finally pulled apart, Dominic glanced at his watch. "I should probably let you get some rest. You've had a long day." Sanaa didn't want him to leave, but she also knew they were still navigating boundaries, still figuring out the pace that worked for both of them. So she nodded and walked him to the door. "Hey," Dominic said before leaving, "what are you doing for Thanksgiving?" "Probably working at the center. We're doing a community dinner for families who don't have anywhere else to go." "That's beautiful. Can I help?" "I'd like to volunteer if you'll have me." Sanaa's smile was brilliant. "I'd love that. But what about your family? We usually do Thanksgiving dinner in the evening. I can volunteer during the day and still make it to Amara's for turkey." "Then yes, absolutely. We always need extra hands." Dominic kissed her once more, gentle and lingering. "I'll see you Thursday then." After he left, Sanaa leaned against her closed door and let out a breath. She felt lighter than she had in years, like she was finally stepping into the life she was meant to have. Thanksgiving Day was beautifully chaotic. The community center was packed with families, and volunteers rushed around setting up tables, serving food, and keeping the kids entertained. Dominic showed up at 9 in the morning wearing jeans and a red sweater, ready to work. Sanaa put him on turkey duty, and he spent 3 hours carving bird after bird alongside Julian, who'd also volunteered. The two of them kept up a running commentary that had everyone in the kitchen laughing. "This is actually pretty fun," Julian said, wiping his hands on his apron. "I see why you love this work, Sanaa." "It's the best," Sanaa agreed. She was across the kitchen helping kids decorate paper turkeys for the tables. "Knowing we're helping people have a good day, that matters." Dominic caught her eye and smiled, and Sanaa felt her heart do that flipping thing again. By mid-afternoon, everyone had been fed and the center was winding down. Sanaa's feet ached, but she was happy. She'd spent the day doing work that mattered with people she cared about, and it felt right. "Come to dinner with us," Dominic said as they cleaned up. "Amara's been asking when she'll see you again, and I know she's made enough food to feed an army." Sanaa hesitated. Meeting Dominic's family felt like a big step, even though she'd already met Amara several times. But Dominic looked so hopeful, and truthfully, Sanaa didn't want to spend the evening alone in her new apartment. "Are you sure your sister won't mind the extra guest?" "She'll be thrilled. I already told her you might come. You were pretty confident I'd say yes." "I was hopeful." Dominic grinned. Dinner at Amara's townhouse was warm and welcoming. Amara had invited several friends and extended family members, and the table was loaded with traditional Thanksgiving dishes plus a few Caribbean recipes from their grandmother. Dominic's Aunt Helen was a retired teacher with a quick wit and a warm smile. She asked Sanaa about her work and listened with genuine interest as Sanaa described her new role at Hayes Global. "It sounds like you and my nephew are going to do great things together," Helen said, patting Sanaa's hand. "I'm glad he found you." "I'm glad I found him too," Sanaa said softly. After dinner, everyone gathered in the living room. Someone put on music, and there was laughter and conversation and the easy comfort of people who genuinely enjoyed each other's company. Sanaa found herself talking with Amara in the kitchen as they cleaned up. "I know I've said this before," Amara said as she loaded the dishwasher, "but I'm really happy Dominic met you. He's different now. Lighter. He smiles more." "He makes me happy too," Sanaa admitted. "Happier than I've been in a long time." "Good. You both deserve that." Amara paused, then added, "I know my brother can be intense sometimes. He feels things deeply, and when he cares about someone he goes all in. I just want you to know that he's sincere. What you see is what you get with Dom. No games, no hidden agendas." "I'm learning that," Sanaa said. "It's refreshing after your ex?" Amara's expression turned serious. "Dom told me a little about what you went through. I'm sorry you had to experience that. I'm just glad it's over." "It is over. And now you get to have something beautiful." Amara smiled. "My brother is one of the good ones, Sanaa. Hold on to him." "I plan to." Later, as Dominic drove Sanaa home, she felt a sense of contentment settle over her. The evening had been perfect. Simple and warm and full of genuine connection. "Thank you for inviting me," she said. "Your family is wonderful. They loved you. Aunt Helen cornered me before we left and told me not to mess this up." Sanaa laughed. "Did she really?" "She really did. But don't worry, I have no intention of messing this up." Dominic glanced at her, his expression tender. "I'm falling more in love with you every day, Sanaa." Sanaa's breath caught. It was the first time he'd used the word love so directly. Her heart raced, but instead of fear, she felt a warm rush of emotion. "I love you too," she said softly. "I didn't think I'd ever feel this way again, but I do. I love you, Dominic." He pulled over to the side of the road, put the car in park, and turned to her. "Say that again. I love you." Dominic cupped her face in his hands and kissed her deeply, pouring all his feelings into that one kiss. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. "I never thought I'd find you," Dominic said. 3 years I wondered, and now you're here and you love me. It feels like a miracle." "Maybe it is," Sanaa whispered. "Maybe we were always meant to find each other." They drove the rest of the way to her apartment in comfortable silence, hands linked over the center console. When they arrived, Dominic walked her to her door. "I'll see you Monday at the office," he said. "Your first official day." "I'm nervous," Sanaa admitted. "Don't be. You're going to be amazing." Dominic kissed her forehead. "Good night, Sanaa. I love you." "I love you too." Sanaa went inside and leaned against her door, a huge smile on her face. She'd gone from being trapped and afraid to being loved and hopeful in the span of a month. Tomorrow really was better. And if tonight was any indication, it was only going to keep getting better. "I know you're probably wondering what happens next. Will Trevor really stay away? Can Sanaa and Dominic's relationship survive the pressures of working together? The next chapter holds some surprises you won't want to miss. If you're invested in their story, please hit subscribe and let me know in the comments what you think will happen next. Will they face more obstacles, or is their happy ending finally secure? Sanaa's first 2 weeks at Hayes Global were exhilarating. She had an actual office with her name on a placard outside the door, a budget that made her old resources at the community center look like pocket change, and the authority to make real decisions about programming. Julian was her direct supervisor, and he was supportive and encouraging, never micromanaging but always available when she had questions. She worked closely with teams from different departments, meeting with finance people about budgets, marketing people about outreach campaigns, and legal people about contracts with community organizations. It was challenging and sometimes overwhelming, but it was also deeply fulfilling. Sanaa was making a difference on a scale she'd never imagined possible. She and Dominic kept their relationship professional at work. They'd agreed early on that they didn't want people to think Sanaa had gotten her job because of their personal connection. So at the office they were colleagues. Friendly, respectful but not obviously romantic. It was only after work, when they met at one of their apartments or went out for dinner, that they let their guard down. Those evenings were Sanaa's favorite part of the day. She and Dominic would cook together or order takeout and they'd talk about their work, their hopes, their childhoods. They'd kiss on the couch and watch terrible reality TV, and Dominic would hold her like she was precious. 3 weeks into her new job, on a Wednesday evening, Sanaa was walking to her car in the parking garage when she felt it. That prickling sense of being watched. She turned quickly, her heart racing, but the garage was empty. Just rows of cars and fluorescent lights humming overhead. She shook off the feeling and got into her car, locking the doors immediately. She drove home carefully, checking her rearview mirror more often than necessary, but no one followed her. It's just paranoia, she told herself. Trevor hasn't contacted you in over a month. The restraining order is working. But the feeling didn't go away. Over the next few days, small things started happening. A text from an unknown number that just said, "I miss you." A bouquet of red roses left outside her apartment door with no card. The sense of someone watching her when she left work. Sanaa documented everything and contacted the police. They told her that without proof Trevor was behind it, there wasn't much they could do. The texts came from a burner phone and anyone could have left the flowers. She didn't want to worry Dominic, but he noticed something was wrong almost immediately. "You've been distracted," he said one evening at his penthouse. They were supposed to be watching a movie, but Sanaa had barely paid attention, her mind elsewhere. "What's going on?" Sanaa hesitated, then told him everything. The feeling of being watched, the texts, the flowers. Dominic's expression darkened. "Why didn't you tell me immediately?" "I didn't want to overreact. I don't even know for sure it's Trevor." "Who else would it be?" Dominic pulled out his phone. "I'm calling my security team. As of tonight, you're going to have someone watching your apartment." "Dominic, that's not necessary." "It absolutely is necessary." His voice was firm but not angry. "Sanaa, I will not take chances with your safety. If Trevor is violating the restraining order, we need documentation and we need you protected." Sanaa wanted to argue, wanted to insist she could handle it herself. But the truth was she was scared. The sense of being watched had been growing stronger, and she'd been having trouble sleeping. "Okay," she agreed quietly. "Thank you." Dominic's security team set up surveillance outside Sanaa's apartment that night. The next morning, Sanaa got a text from an unknown number at 6 a.m., "You can't hide from me forever." She immediately forwarded it to Dominic and to the police. This time the police took it more seriously. An officer came to her apartment to take a statement and advised her to vary her routine, to be aware of her surroundings. That afternoon, Dominic showed up at her office. "Pack your things," he said. "You're staying with me until this is resolved. I can't just move back in with you. People will talk. Let them talk. Your safety is more important than office gossip." Dominic's expression was resolute. "Please, Sanaa. I need to know you're safe." Looking at his face, at the genuine fear and concern there, Sanaa couldn't refuse. "Okay. But just until we figure out if it's really Trevor and what to do about it." "Deal." Sanaa packed a bag that night and moved back into the guest room at Dominic's penthouse. It felt like a step backward, like she was losing the independence she'd fought so hard to gain. But it also felt safe. For a few days, everything was quiet. No more texts. No more flowers. Sanaa started to relax, thinking maybe Trevor had gotten the message, maybe he'd moved on. She should have known better. On Friday evening, Sanaa was leaving work when she saw him. Trevor, standing across the street from the Hayes Global building, partially hidden behind a food truck. He was wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses, but she'd know his posture anywhere. Her blood ran cold. She immediately turned around and went back into the building, her hands shaking as she called Dominic. He was in a meeting but stepped out immediately when his assistant told him it was urgent. "He's here," Sanaa said without preamble. "Trevor. He's across the street from the building. Stay where you are. I'm coming down." Dominic arrived with 2 security guards within 3 minutes. They all went outside together, but Trevor was gone. "I saw him," Sanaa insisted. "He was right there by the taco truck." "I believe you." Dominic pulled out his phone. "I'm calling the police. This is a clear violation of the restraining order." The police came and took Sanaa's statement. They searched the area but found no sign of Trevor. They promised to increase patrols around both Sanaa's apartment and the Hayes Global building. That night, Sanaa couldn't sleep. She lay in the guest room at Dominic's penthouse, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing with fear and frustration. Around 2 in the morning, there was a soft knock on her door. "Come in," she called quietly. Dominic entered, wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt, his hair mussed. "I heard you tossing and turning. Are you okay?" "I can't shut my brain off. Can I sit?" Sanaa nodded, and Dominic sat on the edge of the bed. "I'm so angry that he's doing this to you," Dominic said. "That he won't just let you move on and be happy. He never could handle me making choices he didn't approve of. Leaving him was the ultimate betrayal in his eyes. You know this isn't your fault, right? His behavior, his obsession, that's all on him." "I know. But knowing it and feeling it are different things." Sanaa sat up, pulling her knees to her chest. "I thought I was done being afraid. I thought I'd finally escaped. But he's still controlling my life, even from a distance." "Not for long." Dominic's jaw was set. "Tomorrow we're filing for a criminal complaint. We have evidence now of him violating the restraining order. We're going to make sure he faces consequences. What if he doesn't stop? What if he keeps coming back? Then we'll keep fighting. But Sanaa, I promise you he will not hurt you. I won't let him." The certainty in Dominic's voice soothed something in Sanaa's chest. She reached for his hand. "Will you stay?" she asked. "Just until I fall asleep? I don't want to be alone right now." "Of course." Dominic lay down on top of the covers beside her, and Sanaa curled into his side, her head on his chest. His heartbeat was steady and calm, and the warmth of his body chased away some of her fear. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too. So much." Dominic pressed a kiss to her hair. "Try to sleep. I'm right here." With Dominic beside her, Sanaa finally drifted off, feeling safer than she had in days. The next morning, Vanessa filed a criminal complaint against Trevor for violating the restraining order. The police issued a warrant for his arrest, but when they went to his apartment he was gone. "We'll find him," the detective assigned to the case assured them. "He can't hide forever." But days passed with no sign of Trevor. The unknown numbers stopped texting. The feeling of being watched faded. It was like he'd vanished. Sanaa wanted to feel relieved, but instead, the uncertainty made her more anxious. Not knowing where Trevor was or what he was planning felt worse than knowing he was watching her. Dominic tried to keep her distracted. He took her to dinner, to movies, on long walks through the city. He was patient when she woke up from nightmares, gentle when she snapped at him out of stress. "I'm sorry," Sanaa said one evening after she'd been particularly short with him about something trivial. "I know I'm not being fair to you. You're dealing with a stalker ex-husband. You're allowed to not be at your best." Dominic pulled her into a hug. "I'm not going anywhere, Sanaa. No matter how hard this gets." 2 weeks after Trevor's disappearance, Sanaa was finally starting to relax again. Maybe he'd really given up. Maybe he'd moved away. She was at the office late one Thursday night, finishing up a grant proposal that was due the next morning. Most of the building was empty, just security guards and a few other dedicated workaholics. Sanaa was so focused on her work that she didn't hear her office door open. "Working late, I see." She looked up with a gasp. Trevor stood in her doorway wearing dark clothes, his expression cold. Sanaa's heart slammed against her ribs. Her first instinct was to scream, but fear choked the sound in her throat. "How did you get in here?" she managed. "I have my ways. Security in this building isn't as good as your boyfriend thinks." Trevor stepped inside and closed the door behind him. Sanaa's hand moved slowly toward her phone on the desk. "Don't," Trevor said sharply. "We're just going to talk, Sanaa. That's all. Just talk. You're not supposed to be anywhere near me. There's a warrant out for your arrest." "I don't care about the warrant. I care about you. About us." Trevor moved closer and Sanaa stood, putting her desk between them. We were good together, Sana. We can be good again. You just need to remember that. We were never good together. You controlled me, belittled me, made me feel worthless. I was trying to help you. To make you better. Trevor's voice rose slightly. You were always so stubborn, so determined to do things your own way. I was just trying to guide you. You were trying to break me. Trevor's expression twisted with anger. And now you think you've found someone better? Dominic Hayes? Please. He's just using you, Sana. Once he gets bored, he'll throw you away. But I'll still be here. I'm the only one who truly knows you. You don't know me at all. Sana's voice was stronger now, her fear giving way to anger. You never bothered to learn who I really was. You just wanted someone to control. That's not true. It is true. And I'm done letting you make me doubt myself. Sana reached for her phone, and this time Trevor didn't stop her. She hit the emergency button, and within seconds alarms were blaring throughout the building. Trevor's face went pale. What did you do? I called for help. Security will be here any second. Trevor looked toward the door, then back at Sana. For a moment she thought he might try to grab her, to force her to leave with him. But then heavy footsteps sounded in the hallway and multiple voices called out. Trevor ran. He yanked open the office door and sprinted down the hallway. Security guards chased after him, shouting for him to stop. Sana's legs gave out and she sank into her chair, shaking. Within moments, Dominic burst into her office, his face frantic. Sana, are you hurt? Did he touch you? I'm okay. He didn't hurt me. But her voice was shaking and tears were streaming down her face. Dominic pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry he got in here. This should never have happened. It's not your fault. They'll catch him. Security has him trapped on the stairwell. And they did. Within 5 minutes, security had apprehended Trevor and called the police. He was arrested and taken away in handcuffs, still shouting that Sana was making a mistake, that she'd regret this. The police took Sana's statement, and then Dominic drove her home to the penthouse. She was exhausted, emotionally drained, but also strangely relieved. It's really over, she said as they sat on Dominic's couch. He's been arrested. There's evidence. He can't keep doing this. It's over, Dominic confirmed. He'll face real consequences this time. Violating a restraining order, breaking into a private building, harassment. His lawyer told the police he'll probably take a plea deal to avoid trial. Good. Sana leaned her head on Dominic's shoulder. I just want to move forward. I want to focus on work, on us, on building the life I want. You can. And I'll be right beside you. That night, Sana slept deeply, truly at peace for the first time in weeks. Trevor was in custody. The nightmare was finally ending. And tomorrow she could start truly living again. Trevor Mitchell took a plea deal. Faced with multiple counts of violating a restraining order, trespassing, and stalking, his lawyer advised him that going to trial would likely result in a harsher sentence. So Trevor pled guilty to all charges in exchange for a reduced sentence, 18 months in county jail, followed by 3 years of probation and mandatory counseling. Most importantly, as part of the deal, he agreed to a permanent restraining order that would remain in effect for 10 years after his release. Sana sat in the courtroom as the judge accepted the plea, Dominic beside her, his hand warm in hers. She watched Trevor stand before the judge, looking smaller, somehow diminished. He didn't look at her, didn't try to make one final appeal. When the judge pronounced the sentence and Trevor was led away by deputies, Sana felt a weight lift from her shoulders. It was truly over. He couldn't hurt her anymore. How do you feel? Dominic asked as they left the courthouse. Free, Sana said simply. For the first time in years I feel free. They went to lunch at a small cafe, and Sana found herself laughing more easily than she had in weeks. The constant undercurrent of fear that had been with her since leaving Trevor, the hypervigilance and anxiety, it was finally fading. I've been thinking, Dominic said as they finished their meal. Once Trevor is actually incarcerated, would you consider moving back to your own apartment? I know you've been at my place because of the threat, but I don't want you to feel like you have to stay there. Sana considered this. She'd been living at Dominic's penthouse for nearly a month now, and while she loved being close to him, she also missed having her own space. The apartment she'd worked so hard to afford was sitting mostly empty. I think I would like to move back, she admitted. Not because I don't love being with you, but because I need to prove to myself that I can. That I'm not letting fear dictate where I live. I understand completely. And for the record, I'll miss having you around all the time. We can still see each other every day. We work in the same building. It's not the same as waking up and knowing you're down the hall. Dominic smiled. But I respect your need for independence. How about this? You move back to your place and we continue dating like normal people. Dates, sleepovers, all of it. But on your terms, at your pace. That sounds perfect. Sanaa moved back to her Fremont apartment the following weekend. It felt good to be in her own space again, surrounded by her things, making her own choices about her daily routine. But she also missed Dominic's presence, the comfort of knowing he was just down the hall if she needed him. They fell into a new rhythm. They'd have dinner together 3 or 4 times a week, alternating between their apartments. On weekends, they'd explore the city, trying new restaurants, visiting museums, taking long walks along the waterfront. Their relationship deepened. They talked about everything, their hopes for the future, their fears, their past mistakes. Dominic shared stories about his father, about the pressure of living up to a legacy. Sanaa opened up about her childhood, about her complicated relationship with her own father who'd left. And physically their relationship grew more intimate. They took their time, never rushing, always checking in with each other. When they finally made love for the first time, 6 weeks after Trevor's arrest, it was tender and emotional and absolutely nothing like Sanaa's experiences with her ex-husband. With Trevor, intimacy had been transactional, something she did to keep the peace. With Dominic, it was a true connection, a physical expression of the love they felt. Afterward, as they lay tangled together in Dominic's bed, Sanaa felt tears on her cheeks. "Are you okay?" Dominic asked immediately, concern in his voice. "Did I hurt you?" "No. God, no." Sanaa smiled through her tears. "These are happy tears. I didn't know it could be like this. I didn't know I could feel this safe, this loved." Dominic kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "You are safe. You are loved. Always." Work continued to be fulfilling. Sanaa's community outreach program was exceeding expectations. She'd already signed partnerships with 5 new community centers across Seattle, and the programming she developed was showing real results. Kids were staying in school, test scores were improving, and families were getting access to resources they'd never had before. Julian pulled her aside one afternoon in December. "You're killing it, you know that?" he said, grinning. "The board of directors specifically mentioned your work in last week's meeting. They're impressed." "Really?" Sanaa felt a flush of pride. "Really? Dom was trying to play it cool, but you should have seen his face when they were praising you. He looked like he might burst." Sanaa laughed. She and Dominic still kept their relationship mostly private at work, but people were starting to figure it out. They'd been seen leaving together too many times, and the way they looked at each other apparently wasn't as subtle as they thought. "Is it going to be a problem?" Sanaa asked. "Us dating?" "Not even a little bit. You earned your position and you're excelling at it. The fact that you and Dom fell in love is just a bonus." Julian's expression turned more serious. "I'm happy for both of you, by the way. I've never seen Dom this content. And you deserve someone who treats you well." "Thank you, Julian. That means a lot." As Christmas approached, Sanaa felt herself settling into a happiness she'd never thought possible. Trevor was in jail. Her career was thriving. She had friends, family who loved her, and a boyfriend who made her feel cherished every single day. Dominic invited her to spend Christmas with his family, and Sanaa invited him to come to Spokane to meet her mother for New Year's. Both invitations were accepted with enthusiasm. Christmas at Amara's was magical. The house was decorated with lights and garland, and there were presents piled under an enormous tree. Dominic had gotten Sanaa a beautiful bracelet with a small sunrise charm, a reference to the message she'd written on his coffee cup. "So you always remember," he said as he fastened it around her wrist, "that tomorrow will be better, but today is pretty wonderful too." Sanaa's gift to him was a framed photograph she'd had taken, the two of them at the park where they'd had their first real conversation after the gala. They were both laughing, caught mid-moment, and the joy on their faces was evident. "This is perfect," Dominic said, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you." They spent the day with Amara, Aunt Helen, and various cousins and friends. There was too much food, too much laughter, and an absurd number of terrible Christmas movies. It was exactly the kind of holiday Sanaa had always dreamed of but never experienced with Trevor. Meeting Sanaa's mother was equally wonderful. Dorothy Washington was a force of nature, warm and wise and not afraid to speak her mind. She and Dominic hit it off immediately, bonding over their shared love of terrible puns and their obvious affection for Sanaa. "You treat my daughter right," Dorothy told Dominic on New Year's Day, fixing him with a stern look. "She's been through enough. I plan to spend the rest of my life making her happy," Dominic said seriously. Dorothy studied him for a long moment, then nodded. I believe you. Welcome to the family, Dominic. Sanaa, overhearing this exchange from the kitchen, felt her heart swell. She'd been so afraid for so long, convinced that she'd never be happy, never be safe. But here she was, surrounded by people who loved her, building a life that was entirely her own. When they returned to Seattle, Dominic took her to dinner at a fancy restaurant overlooking Puget Sound. It was the middle of January and the night was cold but clear, stars visible in the dark sky. I have something to tell you, Dominic said over dessert. Sanaa's heart skipped. Okay. These past few months with you have been the happiest of my life. Every day I wake up grateful that you grabbed my hand at that gala, grateful that fate brought us back together after 3 years. I love you more than I thought it was possible to love someone. Sanaa's eyes filled with tears. I love you too. I know we haven't been together that long and I don't want to rush you. But I also don't want to waste any more time. Dominic reached across the table and took her hand. Sanaa Washington, I want to build a life with you. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want to support your dreams and share my own with you. I want everything. I want that too, Sanaa whispered. Then move in with me. Not because you're scared or because you need protection. Move in with me because we're building something beautiful together and we both want to be in the same place. Sanaa felt joy bubbling up inside her chest. A year ago she'd been trapped in a marriage that was suffocating her. 6 months ago she'd been terrified and alone. And now this incredible man was asking her to build a life with him. Yes, she said, laughing through her tears. Yes, I'll move in with you. Dominic's smile was brilliant. He stood and came around the table, pulling her into his arms and kissing her deeply. Other diners at the restaurant glanced over, some smiling at the obvious display of affection. When they finally pulled apart, Dominic rested his forehead against hers. You've made me so happy. You've saved my life, Sanaa said. In every way that matters. We saved each other. Over the next few weeks, Sanaa gradually moved her belongings into Dominic's penthouse. She gave up her Fremont apartment without regret. This time, moving in together felt right, felt like the natural progression of their relationship rather than something forced by circumstance. They redecorated the second bedroom to be Sanaa's office, a space where she could work from home when needed. Dominic cleared out half his closet for her clothes and insisted she put her own touches throughout the penthouse. This is your home too, he said. I want you to feel like you belong here. I do belong here. With you. Life settled into a comfortable routine. They'd wake up together, sharing coffee and conversation before heading to work. Evenings were spent cooking dinner, talking about their days, making plans for the future. Weekends involved long walks, visits with family and friends, and lazy mornings in bed. Sanaa's work continued to flourish. The outreach program expanded to 10 community centers, then 15. She hired a small team to help manage the growth, and together they developed new initiatives focused on college preparation, job training, and mental health support for at-risk youth. Dominic's company thrived as well. Hayes Global was named one of the best places to work in Seattle, and their community investment was recognized with several awards. At every ceremony, Dominic made sure to credit Sanaa and her team for the success of their outreach programs. Trevor remained in jail, serving his sentence. Sanaa heard through the legal grapevine that he'd completed his anger management classes and was seeing a therapist regularly. She hoped, genuinely, that he'd get the help he needed. But she also had no desire to ever see him again. Her divorce was finalized in March, exactly 1 year after she'd first left Trevor. Sanaa signed the papers in Vanessa's office with Dominic beside her, and when it was done, she felt nothing but relief. I'm officially free, she said. You've been free for a long time, Dominic corrected gently. This is just the paperwork catching up. That night, they celebrated with champagne and pizza on the couch, watching one of Dominic's terrible action movies. It was perfect. Spring came to Seattle with cherry blossoms and longer days. Sanaa and Dominic took a weekend trip to the San Juan Islands, staying in a cozy bed and breakfast and spending their days hiking and exploring tide pools. It was there, on a quiet beach with the sun setting over the water, that Dominic asked her the question she'd been secretly hoping for. He didn't get down on one knee. Instead, he took both her hands in his and looked into her eyes with all the love in the world. Sanaa, these past months with you have shown me what real partnership looks like. What real love looks like. You challenge me, inspire me, and make me want to be better. I don't want to imagine my life without you in it. He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket and opened it, revealing a stunning ring with a single diamond that caught the fading sunlight. Will you marry me? Sanaa's heart felt like it might burst. She thought about the scared woman who'd grabbed a stranger's hand at a gala, desperate for any kind of help. She thought about the coffee cup message that had connected them years before either of them knew how important that connection would become. She thought about all the small kindnesses and big gestures that had brought them to this moment. "Yes," she said, her voice strong and sure. "Yes, I'll marry you." Dominic slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. When they pulled apart, both of them were crying happy tears. "I can't wait to spend the rest of my life with you," Dominic said. "Tomorrow will be better," Sanaa whispered, "but today is already perfect." They stood on that beach until the stars came out, wrapped in each other's arms, planning their future together. A future full of love, hope, and endless possibility. The engagement brought a new kind of happiness into Sanaa's life. She'd worn the ring for exactly 2 days before Amara noticed it during a lunch meeting and let out a shriek that turned heads throughout the restaurant. "Are you serious?" "He finally did it." Amara grabbed Sanaa's hand to examine the ring more closely. "It's beautiful. Oh my God, I'm going to have a sister." Word spread quickly through their friend circle and families. Dorothy cried happy tears over FaceTime. Aunt Helen insisted on throwing them an engagement party. Julian claimed he'd known all along they were meant for each other. At work, Sanaa and Dominic finally stopped trying to hide their relationship. They kept things professional during business hours, but everyone knew they were engaged and the general response was overwhelmingly positive. "You two give me hope," one of the young analysts told Sanaa in the break room. "It's nice to see that good people can find each other." Planning the wedding became a joyful project. Sanaa and Dominic agreed they wanted something intimate and meaningful rather than a huge, elaborate affair. They settled on a garden ceremony in early August at a beautiful estate outside the city, with about 75 guests. Amara was Sanaa's maid of honor, of course, and Julian stood as Dominic's best man. Sanaa's mother flew in from Spokane to help with the planning, and the three women spent happy hours looking at flowers, tasting cakes, and discussing color schemes. "I want red," Sanaa said firmly. "Bright, beautiful red. Not blush or burgundy. Red. Red for hope, red for strength, red for love," Dorothy said approvingly. "It's perfect." The months leading up to the wedding were busy but wonderful. Sanaa's outreach program continued to expand. By summer, they'd partnered with 23 community centers across the Seattle area, and they were in talks to expand the model to other cities in Washington state. Dominic's company secured several major contracts, and Hayes' global stock price reached an all-time high. He was featured in business magazines and asked to speak at conferences, but he always made sure to come home to Sanaa at the end of each day. In June, Sanaa got a surprise letter forwarded from her lawyer's office. It was from Trevor. She stared at the envelope for a long time before opening it, her hands shaking slightly. Dominic was out of town for a business trip, but she called him anyway. "Do I open it?" she asked. "That's entirely up to you. What do you want to do?" Sanaa thought about it. She'd spent so long letting Trevor control her emotions, her decisions, her life. She didn't want to give him that power anymore. "I want to open it," she decided. "I need to know what he has to say. Then open it. And call me back after, okay? I'm here for you. I love you. I love you too." Sanaa hung up and carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a single page, handwritten in Trevor's familiar script. "Sanaa, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even know if I deserve forgiveness. But I wanted you to know that I'm working on myself. The therapist here has helped me see how controlling I was, how much I hurt you. I told myself I was protecting you or helping you, but really I was trying to make you into what I wanted instead of loving who you actually were. I'm genuinely sorry for everything. For the years of emotional abuse, for the stalking after you left, for not respecting your choice to move on. You deserved so much better than what I gave you. I heard through mutual acquaintances that you're getting married. I hope he treats you the way you always deserve to be treated. I hope you're happy. I'm not writing this to ask for anything from you. I just wanted you to know that I take full responsibility for what happened between us, and I'm committed to becoming a better person. Not for you, not to win you back, but for myself and for anyone I might be in a relationship with in the future. I wish you all the best, Sanaa. Truly, Trevor." Sanaa read the letter 3 times, trying to process how she felt. There was anger, yes. Trevor had put her through hell, and one letter didn't erase years of trauma. But there was also a strange sense of closure. He'd taken responsibility. He'd apologized without making excuses. And he'd acknowledged that she deserved better. It wasn't forgiveness exactly. But it was the beginning of letting go completely. She called Dominic back and read him the letter. "How do you feel?" he asked when she finished. Lighter, Sanaa said honestly. I don't forgive him, not yet. Maybe not ever. But knowing that he's actually working on himself, that he recognizes what he did wrong, it helps. It means it really is over. You don't have to respond if you don't want to. I don't think I will. There's nothing left to say. That part of my life is closed. Then we focus on the future. On us. On the life we're building. On tomorrow being better. Always. The weeks before the wedding flew by in a flurry of final preparations. The dress fittings, the flower arrangements, the seating charts. Sanaa was nervous but excited. This was really happening. She was marrying the love of her life, the man who'd seen her at her most desperate and chosen to stand beside her anyway. 2 days before the wedding, Sanaa's brother James arrived from his naval base. She hadn't seen him in over a year, and she threw herself into his arms when he walked through the door of the penthouse. Look at you, James said, holding her at arm's length to study her. You look happy, San. Really happy. I am. Happier than I've ever been. James met Dominic that evening over dinner, and the two men hit it off immediately. They talked about sports, about James's experiences in the Navy, about Dominic's plans to expand Hayes Global internationally. By the end of the night, James pulled Sanaa aside. He's good for you, James said. I can see it in your eyes. You're not scared anymore. I'm not, Sanaa agreed. I'm finally free. The day before the wedding, all the women in both families gathered for a spa day. Dorothy, Amara, Aunt Helen, and several cousins and friends spent the afternoon getting pampered, laughing and sharing stories. I'm so proud of you, Dorothy told Sanaa as they sat side by side getting pedicures. You could have let what happened with Trevor define you, make you bitter or afraid. But instead you chose to heal. You chose hope. That takes courage. I had good examples, Sanaa said, squeezing her mother's hand. You showed me what strength looks like. That night, following tradition, Sanaa stayed at a hotel with her mother and Amara while Dominic stayed at the penthouse with Julian and James. Sanaa tried to sleep but was too excited. She kept thinking about tomorrow, about standing in front of everyone they loved and promising to spend her life with Dominic. Around midnight her phone buzzed. A text from Dominic. Can't sleep. Too excited to marry you tomorrow. Sanaa smiled and texted back. Same. I love you. I love you more. See you at the altar. Wouldn't miss it for the world. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear. Perfect August weather, warm but not too hot. Sanaa woke to sunshine streaming through the hotel windows and her mother bringing her coffee. It's your wedding day, baby, Dorothy said, kissing Sanaa's forehead. The next few hours were a blur of hair, makeup, and getting dressed. Sanaa's wedding gown was stunning, a fitted red dress with delicate lace details and a flowing train. She'd chosen red deliberately, a bold choice that represented everything she'd become. Strong, confident, unafraid to take up space. When she looked at herself in the mirror, fully dressed with her hair in soft curls and her makeup perfect, she barely recognized the scared woman who'd grabbed a stranger's hand less than a year ago. That woman had been desperate and broken. This woman was whole. You're beautiful, Amara said, tears in her eyes. Don't cry, you'll ruin your makeup, Sanaa said, but she was crying too. Dorothy helped Sanaa put on the bracelet Dominic had given her for Christmas, the one with the sunrise charm. Something borrowed, Dorothy said, clasping her own pearl necklace around Sanaa's neck. Something blue, she added, tucking a blue handkerchief into Sanaa's bouquet. And something old, she finished, placing her own mother's earrings in Sanaa's ears. What about something new? Sanaa asked. That's the dress and the life you're starting today. Dorothy cupped Sanaa's face gently. I'm so happy for you, sweetheart. The ceremony was held in a garden filled with summer flowers. White chairs were arranged in rows on either side of an aisle covered in red rose petals. String lights hung from the trees, ready to glow when evening came, and the sound of a string quartet filled the air. Sanaa waited in a small cottage at the edge of the garden, peeking through the windows as guests arrived. She saw Aunt Helen resplendent in purple. She saw co-workers from Hayes Global, kids and families from her community centers, friends she'd made over the past year. And then she saw Dominic. He stood at the altar with Julian beside him, wearing a navy blue suit that made him look impossibly handsome. Even from a distance, she could see he was nervous, his hands clasped in front of him as he spoke quietly with Julian. The music changed, signaling the start of the ceremony. Amara walked down the aisle first, beautiful in her red bridesmaid dress, followed by two of Sanaa's cousins. Then it was Sanaa's turn. She took her brother's arm as he'd agreed to walk her down the aisle in place of their absent father. James squeezed her hand. Ready? He whispered. So ready. The doors opened and the guests stood. But Sanaa only had eyes for Dominic. The moment their gazes met, his face transformed. Pure joy, pure love, pure wonder. She walked toward him with steady steps, her head high, her heart full. This wasn't a woman being given away. This was a woman choosing her future, choosing love, choosing happiness. When she reached the altar, James placed her hand in Dominic's and stepped back. Dominic brought her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. You're beautiful, he whispered. So are you. The officiant, a friend of Dominic's family, began the ceremony with words about love, commitment, and partnership. But Sanaa barely heard them. She was too focused on Dominic, on the way he looked at her like she was the most precious thing in the world. When it came time for vows, Dominic went first. Sanaa, he began, his voice strong despite the emotion in it, 3 years ago you showed kindness to a stranger who needed it. You reminded me that tomorrow could be better, and that hope was worth holding on to. You saved me that day even though you didn't know it. And then, when fate brought us back together, you let me stand beside you. You let me see your strength, your courage, your incredible heart. I promise to spend every day of our marriage honoring the trust you've placed in me. I promise to support your dreams, to celebrate your victories, to comfort you in hard times. I promise to be your partner in all things, to listen when you speak, to laugh with you, to build a life that makes us both happy. I love you more than words can express, and I can't wait to see what tomorrow brings when we face it together. Sanaa was crying openly now, not bothering to wipe away her tears. She took a steadying breath and began her own vows. Dominic, when I grabbed your hand at that gala, I was running from danger. But I was also running toward something even though I didn't know it yet. I was running toward safety, toward hope, toward love. You gave me all of those things without hesitation. You saw me at my most vulnerable and never once made me feel weak. Instead, you showed me my own strength. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. You loved me when I didn't think I was worthy of love. I promise to spend our marriage being the partner you deserve. I promise to support you, to challenge you, to stand beside you through whatever comes. I promise to remind you every day that tomorrow will be better, but today is already wonderful because we're together. I love you with everything I am, and I'm so grateful that fate brought us back to each other. There wasn't a dry eye in the garden. Even Julian was discreetly wiping at his face. The officiant smiled. By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Dominic, you may kiss your bride. Dominic cupped Sanaa's face in his hands and kissed her deeply, putting all his love and promise into that one moment. The guests erupted in applause and cheers. When they finally pulled apart, both grinning, the officiant said, Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Mr. and Mrs. Hayes. Hand in hand, Sanaa and Dominic walked back down the aisle as their guests threw rose petals. The joy on their faces was unmistakable. The reception was held in a beautiful tent nearby, decorated with red flowers and twinkling lights. There was dancing and laughter, toasts that made everyone cry and laugh in equal measure. Julian's best man speech was perfect. I've known Dominic for 15 years and I've never seen him as happy as he is with Sanaa. She challenges him, inspires him, and makes him laugh. Together, they're proof that good things really do come to those who wait, and that sometimes the best love stories are the ones that take a little while to find their way. To Dominic and Sanaa. Amara's maid of honor speech was equally touching. Sanaa, you're not just gaining a husband today. You're gaining a whole family who loves you. My brother is the best man I know, and he deserves someone as kind, strong, and amazing as you. Thank you for making him so happy. To the happy couple. Sanaa and Dominic's first dance was to a slow, romantic song. As they swayed together, Dominic whispered in her ear, How are you feeling, Mrs. Hayes? Perfect. Absolutely perfect. Good. Because this is just the beginning. Later in the evening, Sanaa stood on the edge of the dance floor watching their friends and family celebrate. Her mother was dancing with Julian. Amara was laughing with James. Dominic was talking animatedly with some colleagues, his hand gesturing as he told a story. This was her life now. Full of love and laughter and possibility. A year ago, she couldn't have imagined this moment. She'd been so broken, so afraid. But she'd chosen to be brave. She grabbed a hand in the darkness and found light. Dominic caught her eye across the room and smiled, excusing himself from his conversation to come to her side. What are you thinking about? He asked, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind. About how far we've come. About how much my life has changed. Our lives, Dominic corrected gently. We did this together. Together, Sanaa agreed, leaning back against him. They stood that way for a long moment, just holding each other, surrounded by everyone they loved. Ready to start our forever? Dominic asked. Sanaa turned in his arms to face him. I've been ready since the moment you took my hand and didn't let go. They kissed as their friends and family cheered around them, the start of a beautiful forever. The day after their wedding, Sanaa and Dominic left for their honeymoon in Hawaii. 2 weeks on Maui, staying in a beachfront resort where they could relax, explore, and simply enjoy being married. Those 2 weeks were pure bliss. They spent their days swimming in crystal-clear water, hiking through rainforests, and eating amazing food. Their evenings were spent watching sunsets from their private balcony, talking about their future, making love, and falling even more deeply in love. I could stay here forever, Sanaa said one afternoon as they lounged on the beach. We could move here. I'll run the company remotely. Sanaa laughed. As much as I'd love that, we have work to do back home. Kids to help, programs to run. Always thinking of others, Dominic said fondly. It's one of the things I love most about you. When they returned to Seattle, refreshed and deeply happy, they settled into married life with ease. They'd already been living together for months, so the transition was smooth. But there was something different now, something deeper in their connection. They were husband and wife, partners in every sense of the word. Work picked up quickly. Sanaa's outreach program had been approved for expansion into Tacoma and Spokane, and she spent September and October traveling to those cities, meeting with community leaders and setting up new partnerships. It was exhausting but fulfilling work. Dominic was equally busy. Hayes Global was in the process of acquiring a smaller tech company, and the negotiations took up most of his time. But no matter how busy they were, they always made time for each other. Date nights, morning coffee conversations, weekend getaways. In November, Sanaa realized she was late. She'd been so busy that she almost missed it, but when she counted back, she realized she was over 2 weeks late. She bought a pregnancy test on her lunch break, her hands shaking with a mixture of hope and nervousness. She and Dominic had talked about kids, about wanting a family eventually, but they'd only been married 3 months. Was it too soon? But as she sat in the bathroom of her office, watching the test, and saw the 2 lines appear, she felt nothing but joy. She was pregnant. Sanaa wanted to tell Dominic immediately, but she also wanted to make it special. So she stopped at a bookstore on the way home and bought a children's book. Tomorrow will be better. She wrapped it carefully and waited for Dominic to get home. When he walked in that evening, exhausted from back-to-back meetings, Sanaa was waiting with dinner and the wrapped gift on the table. What's this? He asked, kissing her hello. An early present. Open it. Dominic unwrapped the book, looking confused. Then understanding dawned on his face and he looked up at her with wide eyes. Are we? We're having a baby, Sanaa said, tears streaming down her face. Dominic let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. He crossed the room in 2 strides and pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. We're having a baby, he repeated, wonder in his voice. Sanaa, we're going to be parents. Are you happy? She asked, even though she could see the answer on his face. Happy doesn't even begin to cover it. I'm ecstatic. I'm terrified. I'm so grateful. He pulled back to look at her. How are you feeling? Are you okay? Do you need to sit down? Should I call a doctor? Sanaa laughed at his immediate protectiveness. I'm fine. I have an appointment with my OB next week to confirm everything, but the test was positive. We're having a baby, Dominic said again, like he couldn't quite believe it. They spent the evening talking about the future, about names and nurseries and how they'd balance parenting with their careers. It was exciting and overwhelming, but mostly it was joyful. The next week, the doctor confirmed that Sanaa was about 6 weeks pregnant, with a due date in early July. Everything looked healthy and normal. They decided to wait until after the first trimester to tell people, but keeping the secret was hard. Sanaa found herself touching her still flat stomach throughout the day, marveling at the life growing inside her. Dominic became hilariously overprotective, worrying about everything from her lifting boxes to her drinking enough water. You're going to drive me crazy for the next 7 months, aren't you? Sanaa teased one evening when he'd insisted she put her feet up after work. Absolutely, Dominic confirmed. Get used to it. By December they couldn't hide it anymore. Sanaa was starting to show, and the morning sickness that had plagued her in November was making it hard to keep up her usual energy at work. They told their families at Christmas. Dorothy cried happy tears and immediately started planning how often she could visit once the baby arrived. Amara squealed and declared she was going to be the best aunt ever. Aunt Helen started knitting tiny blankets. The announcement at work was met with equal enthusiasm. Congratulations poured in from all directions, and Sanaa was touched by how genuinely happy people seemed for them. As winter turned to spring, Sanaa's belly grew. She had to buy new clothes, maternity versions of the professional outfits she wore to work. Dominic loved her pregnant body, constantly telling her how beautiful she was, how in awe he was of what her body was doing. They found out in March that they were having a girl. Dominic cried when he saw the ultrasound, his hand gripping Sanaa's tightly. "A daughter," he whispered. "We're having a daughter." They spent weekends setting up the nursery, painting the walls a soft yellow and filling the room with books and toys. Sanaa was determined that their daughter would grow up surrounded by love and encouragement, never doubting her worth or her capabilities. They chose the name Hope. Hope Catherine Hayes. Catherine after Sanaa's grandmother, who'd given her the green dress she'd worn to the gala where she'd first met Dominic. "Hope for tomorrow," Dominic said when they agreed on the name. "Perfect." As Sanaa's due date approached, she had to cut back her hours at work. Her body was tired and she needed more rest. Julian and her team stepped up to handle the day-to-day operations of the outreach program, assuring her that everything would be fine while she was on maternity leave. In late June, 2 weeks before her due date, Sanaa woke in the middle of the night with contractions. Dominic, who'd been sleeping lightly for weeks in anticipation of this moment, was up immediately. "Is it time?" he asked, trying to sound calm and failing completely. "I think so," Sanaa said, breathing through another contraction. They grabbed the hospital bag they'd packed weeks ago and headed to the hospital. The labor was long and hard, but Dominic never left Sanaa's side. He held her hand through every contraction, breathed with her, encouraged her, reminded her how strong she was. Finally, at 6:47 a.m. on June 28, Hope Catherine Hayes came into the world, crying lustily and perfectly healthy. The nurse placed the baby on Sanaa's chest, and Sanaa looked down at her daughter with overwhelming love. Hope had a head full of dark curls, beautiful brown skin, and the most perfect little face Sanaa had ever seen. "She's here," Sanaa whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Our Hope is here." Dominic was crying too, his hand gently touching their daughter's tiny head. "She's perfect. You're both perfect." They spent the first hour just staring at Hope, marveling at every tiny detail. Her little fingers, her button nose, the way she yawned and stretched. "I can't believe we made her," Dominic said in wonder. "We made a whole person," Sanaa agreed. Family came to visit throughout the day. Dorothy was beside herself with joy, holding her granddaughter and crying happy tears. Amara couldn't stop taking pictures. James sent a video message from his base, congratulating them and promising to visit as soon as he could. That night, after all the visitors had left and it was just the three of them, Sanaa sat in the hospital bed with Hope sleeping in her arms and Dominic beside her. "A year and a half ago, I grabbed your hand thinking I just needed to escape," Sanaa said softly. "I had no idea I was reaching for my entire future. You gave me hope 3 years before that," Dominic reminded her. "You've always been my tomorrow will be better. And you've been mine." Sanaa looked down at their daughter. "And now we get to be hers too. We get to teach her that tomorrow really can be better, that kindness matters, that love is worth believing in." "She's going to be amazing," Dominic said. "With you as her mother, how could she be anything else?" They sat in comfortable silence for a while, just being together, being a family. Outside the hospital window, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Hope stirred slightly in her sleep, making a small sound that made both her parents smile. "Welcome to the world, little one," Sanaa whispered. "Tomorrow will be better, but today having you here is already more wonderful than we ever imagined." Dominic kissed Sanaa's temple, then gently kissed Hope's forehead. His family. His whole world right here in this room. The future stretched out before them, full of possibility and promise. There would be challenges, of course. Sleepless nights and teething and all the chaos that comes with raising a child. But they'd face it together just like they'd faced everything else. Hand in hand, hearts full, ready for whatever tomorrow would bring. 1 year later, Sanaa sat on the porch of the house they'd bought in the Ballard neighborhood, watching Dominic chase Hope around the backyard. At 15 months old, Hope was walking confidently now, squealing with delight as her father pretended to be a monster chasing her. The house was perfect. 4 bedrooms, a big backyard, and a home office for each of them. They'd moved in when Hope was 6 months old, needing more space than the penthouse could provide. The neighborhood was family-friendly with good schools and parks nearby. Sanaa's maternity leave had lasted 6 months, and when she'd returned to work, it was to an outreach program that had continued to thrive in her absence. Her team had expanded the programming into 4 more cities, and they were in talks with several organizations in other states who wanted to replicate their model. She worked flexible hours now, spending mornings with Hope and afternoons in the office. Dominic had done the same, restructuring his schedule so he could be home for breakfast and dinner every day. They split parenting duties equally, both committed to being present for their daughter. Julian had stepped up as COO of Hayes Global, taking on more of the day-to-day operations so Dominic could have a better work-life balance. It had been the right decision. The company was doing better than ever and Dominic was happier, more relaxed. Life wasn't perfect. There were still hard days. Hope was going through a phase where she woke up at 5 a.m. ready to start the day. Sanaa sometimes struggled with the balance between being a mother and maintaining her career. Dominic occasionally got stressed about board meetings or acquisitions. But they faced it all together, always coming back to what mattered most. Their family, their love for each other, their commitment to building a life filled with kindness and hope. Trevor had been released from jail 6 months ago, finishing his sentence early for good behavior. He'd sent one letter through Vanessa, apologizing again and informing them that he'd moved to California and was starting fresh. He promised he'd never contact them again and so far he'd kept that promise. Sanaa had let go of the last of her anger toward him. She hoped he really was doing better, that he'd learned from his mistakes. But mostly she just didn't think about him anymore. He was a closed chapter in a life that was now filled with so much joy there wasn't room for old pain. "Mama?" Hope called, running toward the porch. "Mama up." Sanaa scooped her daughter into her arms, blowing a raspberry on her chubby cheek that made Hope giggle. Dominic followed more slowly, pretending to be out of breath from the chase. "She's too fast for me," he said dramatically. "I'm getting old." "You're 36, Sanaa reminded him, laughing. "Exactly. Ancient." Hope wriggled to be put down and Sanaa set her on the porch floor. She immediately toddled over to the toy box they kept outside and started pulling out blocks. Dominic sat beside Sanaa on the porch swing, pulling her close. "How was your day?" "Good. We finalized the partnership with the Portland Center. They're excited to start implementing our curriculum." Sanaa leaned her head on his shoulder. "How was yours?" "Productive. We closed the deal with that Japanese supplier. Julian thinks it's going to open up huge opportunities for expansion in Asia." "That's wonderful." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching Hope stack blocks with intense concentration. "I've been thinking," Dominic said, "about everything that's happened. About how we got here. And I keep coming back to that coffee cup. To the fact that you took the time to write a message of hope for a stranger who needed it. You had no idea how much those words would matter, how much they'd change both our lives." Sanaa smiled. "I was having a terrible day. Writing that message was as much for me as it was for you. It was my way of reminding myself that things could get better. And they did. For both of us." "They did," Sanaa agreed. She looked out at their backyard, at their beautiful daughter playing happily, at the life they'd built together. "I never could have imagined this back then. I was so stuck, so afraid. And now you're free. We're free. We're together." Hope abandoned her blocks and climbed onto the porch swing between them, settling herself comfortably against her father's chest. Within minutes, her eyes were drooping. "Nap time?" Sanaa asked softly. "Looks like it." Dominic carefully stood, cradling Hope in his arms. "I'll put her down. You stay here and relax." Sanaa watched him carry their daughter inside, her heart full. She thought about the journey that had brought her here. The pain of her marriage to Trevor, the terror of leaving, the desperate grab for a stranger's hand, the slow building of trust and love with Dominic. Every hard moment had been worth it to get to this place. This beautiful, peaceful, joy-filled place. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother, just checking in. "How are my babies?" Sanaa smiled and typed back, "We're wonderful. Hope is napping, Dominic is being the perfect dad, and I'm sitting on our porch feeling grateful for everything." Dorothy's response came quickly, "You deserve every bit of happiness, sweetheart. I'm so proud of you." Dominic came back outside and resumed his spot on the swing. "She's out cold. Didn't even make it through the first verse of the bedtime song. She had a big day chasing after you. She's going to be a runner. I can tell already." Dominic took Sanaa's hand, interlacing their fingers. "Have I told you today that I love you?" "Only about 5 times. But I never get tired of hearing it. I love you. More than yesterday, less than tomorrow." It was a phrase they'd adopted early in their relationship, a reminder that their love kept growing, kept deepening. "I love you too. Always." They swung gently, the chains creaking softly, the late afternoon sun warm on their faces. Somewhere in the neighborhood, children laughed and played. A bird sang from a nearby tree. Life continued in all its ordinary, extraordinary beauty. Do you ever think about that night? Sanaa asked. At the gala? All the time. I think about how close we came to missing each other. If you'd been standing 10 feet in a different direction, if Trevor had approached you a minute later or earlier, if I'd been somewhere else in the ballroom. So many tiny things had to align perfectly for you to reach for my hand. Fate, Sanaa said simply. Or something like it. Dominic brought her hand to his lips and kissed it. Whatever it was, I'm grateful for it every single day. Me too. Inside the house, they heard Hope start to cry, the sound of a nightmare or a need for comfort. Both parents immediately started to rise, but Dominic gestured for Sanaa to stay. I've got her. You've had her all morning. Sanaa watched him go, then settled back on the swing. She thought about the woman she used to be, the one who wrote hope on a coffee cup while feeling hopeless herself. She thought about the woman who'd grabbed a stranger's hand in desperation, not knowing that hand would lead her to safety, to love, to everything she'd ever wanted. That woman was still inside her, part of her story, part of what made her who she was now. But she was no longer defined by her pain or her fear. She was defined by her strength, her choices, her love. Dominic returned with a sleepy Hope who'd had a bad dream. He settled back on the swing with their daughter between them, and Hope immediately calmed, comforted by her parents' presence. Better? Sanaa asked, smoothing Hope's curls. Hope nodded, sticking her thumb in her mouth and cuddling against Dominic. We should probably get her a Real bed soon, Dominic said. She's getting too big for the crib. A big girl bed, Sanaa agreed. Maybe we'll take her shopping for it. Let her pick out the bedding. She'll choose something with dinosaurs. She's obsessed with them right now. Dinosaurs it is, then. They swung gently, the three of them together, a perfect little unit. The sun continued its slow descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in beautiful colors. I keep thinking about what we're going to tell Hope when she's older, Sanaa said. About how we met, about everything that happened. We'll tell her the truth. That sometimes life is hard, but holding on to hope can lead to beautiful things. That kindness matters, that tomorrow really can be better, and that love is always worth the risk. And we'll tell her that her name means something. That she's our hope, our tomorrow, our proof that beautiful things can come from dark times. She's going to be so loved, Dominic said. She's going to grow up knowing that she can be anything, do anything. We're going to make sure of it. We are, Sanaa agreed. And if she ever needs to grab someone's hand for help, I hope she has the courage to do it. And I hope there's someone kind waiting to hold on. There will be. Because that's the world we're building for her. One kindness at a time, one small act of hope at a time. Hope had fallen back asleep, her little body relaxed and peaceful. Sanaa and Dominic exchanged a look over her head, a look full of love and understanding and shared purpose. This was their family, their life, their forever. It had started with a desperate grasp and a message on a coffee cup. It had survived abuse, fear, and uncertainty. And it had blossomed into something neither of them could have imagined but both of them cherished beyond measure. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new joys, new moments to navigate. But they'd face it all together just like they always had. Hand in hand, hearts full, building a future filled with kindness, hope, and love. The sun set completely, stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Inside the house, lights glowed warmly. Somewhere nearby, a dog barked. The world continued turning, ordinary and miraculous in equal measure. And on the porch of their home in Ballard, Sanaa and Dominic Hayes held their sleeping daughter and each other, grateful for every moment that had led them here, excited for every moment still to come. Tomorrow really was better. But today, right now, in this moment, was already perfect.